chest. Just trash. Golly narrowed her eyes, stepping closer. It smells interesting. Light quickly dangled the red scarf in front of her face. Look, a present. Golly froze. Her violet eyes widened. A present. For you, Light smiled, wrapping the soft wool around her neck. It's Mikasa's scarf. Very rare. Very warm. Golly touched the fabric, stunned. It was the first gift Light had ever given her. Her attention shifted instantly from the suspicious bag to the red wool. Humph. It's acceptable, she muttered, hiding her smile by burying her face in the scarf. Seizing the opportunity, Light bolted out the door with the garbage bag. I can't let Lorna say this stuff, he thought, walking briskly down the street. If she sees high-tech gear and giant clothes appearing out of nowhere, she'll have too many questions. He found a large recycling bin a few blocks away. Checking over his shoulder to ensure Golly hadn't followed him, he tossed the bag inside. Thud. Goodbye, useless junk. Light dusted his hands off and turned to leave. Just as he rounded the corner, Lorna walked out of an art supply store across the street. She spotted his retreating back. Light, she murmured, confused. She saw him dump a bag and run off like a criminal. Curious, she walked over to the bin, but seeing nothing unusual, she shrugged and continued on her way back to the apartment. 5 minutes later, a small girl with purple hair and a leather jacket skipped down the same street. She looked like an innocent elementary schooler, but the butterfly knife spinning in her pocket told a different story. Mindy McCready, also known as Hit Girl. Her father, Big Daddy, had dropped her off at school earlier, but Mindy found high school painfully boring. The curriculum was too slow, and the kids were too soft. Hey, little girl, a voice sneered from an alleyway. Mindy stopped. 3 thugs surrounded her, blocking her path. You look lost, the leader grinned, revealing yellow teeth. Why don't you come play with us? Mindy's eyes widened in mock fear. She trembled, stepping back. Big brother, please be gentle. I don't have much money. Money. The thug laughed, reaching out a greasy hand. We don't want money, sweetie. We want crack. Ah! The scream echoed through the alley, sharp and agonizing. Mindy had snapped the leader's wrist like a dry twig. Before his friends could react, she spun, delivering a brutal kick to the second man's knee, shattering the cap. The third man took a fist to the throat and collapsed, gasping for air. Pathetic, Mindy scoffed, standing over the groaning men. You guys are barely level 1 mobs. She rifled through their pockets, taking their wallets. Consider this a tuition fee. She kicked the leader one last time, sending him crashing into the recycling bin. He flailed, knocking the lid open and tearing a black garbage bag inside. Clatter. Metal parts spilled out onto the dirty pavement. Mindy glanced down, uninterested, until something caught her eye. It was a heavy, mechanical device with gas canisters and a distinct turbine mechanism. Mindy picked it up, her eyes lighting up with recognition. No way. Evening, the Highline Park. The sunset painted the New York skyline in hues of gold and violet. The summer breeze was warm, carrying the sounds of the bustling city below. Light walked along the elevated park, flanked by 2 girls. On his left was Golly, happily licking a lollipop. On his right was Gwen Stacy. Light had successfully kept Lorna and Golly separated for the evening. Lorna, ever the workaholic, had refused his offer for dinner, insisting on practicing her new artistic skills at the apartment. Light knew it was her pride talking. She didn't want to feel like a freeloader. He had bumped into Gwen while shopping for groceries, and she had invited herself along for a walk. Light, I barely see you anymore, Gwen said, flashing him a quick, crinkled nose smile. Dr. Connors has me practically living at the lab. I think I'm starting to dream in equations. I know the feeling, Light replied. Launching the new magazine has been intense. Gwen looked at him, her blue eyes sharp and searching. Since the carnival incident, the dynamic had shifted. She wasn't just his classmate anymore, there was a shared secret, a tension that hummed beneath the surface of their conversations. I heard you're starting 2 new series, Gwen said, tilting her head. How do you manage it all? Most artists struggle with 1 monthly release. You're doing 3 weekly ones? You're either a machine or a wizard. I have a good assistant now, Light smiled. She helps a lot. That's good, Gwen nodded, bumping her shoulder lightly against his. I worry you'll burn out. And then who would I have to debate coffee quality with? They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, the atmosphere shifting from friendly banter to something more intimate. The air between them felt charged, electric. Gwen, usually the one with the quick wit and the confident stride, slowed her pace to match his. She glanced at his hand swinging by his side, then up at his face. She bit her lip, a flicker of amusement and determination in her eyes. She didn't hesitate. She simply reached out and took his hand. Light felt the contact. He didn't pull away. Instead, he turned his hand and interlaced his fingers with hers, giving a gentle squeeze. Gwen looked down at their joined hands, then up at him, a brilliant, knowing smile lighting up her face. Finally, she whispered, half joking. Humph. So lewd, Golly muttered from the side, crunching her lollipop loudly. Light chuckled, about to say something, when, wee woo, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder rapidly. A convoy of police cars sped down the street below, heading toward the Queensboro Bridge. I thought your dad was coming to arrest me for holding your hand, Light joked. Gwen laughed, a bright, genuine sound. Please, he'd probably just give you a lecture on proper grip strength. But her expression grew serious as they watched the flashing lights. Something's happening. Let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome to our channel, and thank you for your support. If there's a favorite novel on the channel and you want the next part, you're just one step away. Become a Patreon member and I can make it depending on your tier. Thank you for your attention.
Look, Light said. They hurried toward the bridge, dragging a reluctant Golly along. The scene was chaotic. Traffic was stopped. Police barricades were up. Hanging off the side of the Queensboro Bridge, suspended precariously over the dark waters of the East River, was a yellow school bus. The cable holding it snapped and groaned under the strain. And hovering above it, cackling maniacally on a glider, was a figure in green armor. The Green Goblin. Light raised an eyebrow. Him again. Usually, in fanfictions, the protagonist meets Tony Stark or saves the world from aliens. Light seemed destined to constantly run into Spider-Man's rogues gallery. Wahahahaha. The Green Goblin stood triumphantly on his glider, hovering above the chaos of the Queensboro Bridge. His mechanical laughter grated against the night air. He saw the police setting up a barricade at the bridge's entrance. Without a word, he launched a micromissile from his glider. Boom! A brilliant fireball illuminated the New York skyline. The deafening explosion sent a shockwave rippling outward. Cars on the bridge swerved in panic, colliding into a twisted snarl of metal and glass. Traffic was instantly gridlocked. Screams erupted from the trapped civilians. People abandoned their vehicles, fleeing on foot as the police struggled to navigate the wreckage. Light, Gwen, and Golly stood near the pedestrian walkway, watching the nightmare unfold. The police can't get through, Gwen said, her voice trembling. They're too late. This is New York, Light said calmly, squeezing her hand. Our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is never late. Thwip. As if summoned, a web line latched onto the bridge tower. Spider-Man swung through the air, landing in a crouch on the suspension cables. Oh, look, it's the hero. The Goblin cackled, holding Mary Jane by the ankle in one hand and clutching the snapped cable of the school bus in the other. Let them go, Goblin. Spider-Man shouted. We are who we choose to be. Goblin roared, his voice distorted by his helmet. Now, choose. Save the woman you love, or the innocent children. Make your choice, Spider-Man. No, you can't do this. Spider-Man begged, his lenses widening in distress. He couldn't abandon either side. Then I'll choose for you. The Goblin didn't give him time to think. He released his grip on both simultaneously. No. With a terrified scream, Mary Jane plummeted toward the river. The school bus groaned and tipped, falling into the abyss. Oh my God. Gwen covered her eyes. The crowd on the bridge gasped in collective horror. But Spider-Man didn't hesitate. He dove. His body became a red and blue streak. He shot a web line, snagging Mary Jane in midair and pulling her into his arms. With his free hand, he shot another line, thick and desperate, catching the bumper of the falling bus just feet above the water. His muscles strained, the fibers of his suit stretching to their limit as he held the immense weight, anchoring himself to the bridge. Impressive. Goblin sneered. But now, you're a stationary target. The glider's blades extended. The Goblin dove toward the immobilized hero. Bang, 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 gunshots rang out. Captain Stacy and his officers had climbed the maintenance ladders and opened fire on the Goblin, forcing him to veer off course. Spider-Man, let go, the barge has them. Captain Stacy shouted. Below, a passing garbage scow had positioned itself under the bus. Spider-Man gently lowered the vehicle onto the heap of trash, ensuring the kids were safe. With his burdens gone, Spider-Man vaulted back up to the bridge, fury radiating from his posture. He engaged the Goblin, and their fight spilled away from the bridge, crashing into a nearby abandoned industrial district. On the bridge. Gwen, why are you here? Captain George Stacy, looking frazzled, spotted his daughter in the crowd. Dad. Gwen ran to him, hugging him tightly. George sighed in relief, but then his eyes narrowed. He saw the young man standing next to her. He recognized him from the carnival incident. More importantly, he saw their interlaced fingers. Boy, George grunted, glaring at Light. Every time I see you, trouble seems to follow. Dad? That's not fair, Gwen protested, shaking his arm. He kept me safe. Captain Stacy, Light said smoothly, not letting go of Gwen's hand, his voice calm and assured. It just means that whenever there's trouble, you can rest easy knowing I'm right here with Gwen, protecting her. George stared at him. The boy had guts. Most teenagers would have crumbled under the police captain glare. You kid. You have a sharp tongue, George muttered, his expression softening slightly. This was America, he couldn't stop them from dating. And honestly, Light had remained calm in 2 terrorist attacks. He was wealthy, successful, and seemingly level-headed. George could do worse for a potential son-in-law, but he wasn't going to make it easy. Get her home safe, George ordered, turning back to his squad. I have a super freak to catch. Light watched him go. Your dad likes me. Gwen rolled her eyes, smiling. Keep telling yourself that. They turned to leave the bridge, and realized something was missing. Wait, where's Golly? Gwen asked, looking around anxiously. Light scanned the crowd. The gluttonous little entity was gone. Don't worry, Light said, knowing Golly's priorities. She probably saw food and wandered off. No criminal in New York is stupid enough to mess with her. Or rather, no criminal would survive messing with her. A few blocks away, Golly stood in front of a bakery window, drooling over a display of strawberry shortcakes. She patted her pockets. Empty. She looked around. In a nearby alley, a group of punk teenagers were smoking. Golly blinked her large violet eyes and walked over. 2 minutes later, Golly walked out of the alley, happily munching on a shortcake. Behind her, the punks lay groaning on the ground, stripped of their wallets. As she ate, a blur of motion caught her eye. Above her, Spider-Man swung past, crashing into an old warehouse. But trailing behind the goblin was something else, a small figure swinging on silver wires. Golly paused mid-bite. That gear. She recognized the distinct gas-powered mechanism. The girl swinging through the air was using the 3D maneuver gear from Attack on Titan. Is it a cosplayer? Golly wondered. Or did Light's trash come to life? Intrigued, and having finished her cake, Golly decided to investigate. The abandoned warehouse. Crash. Spider-Man smashed through the skylight, hitting the concrete floor hard. Before he could recover, a pumpkin bomb bounced next to him. Boom! The explosion threw him against a brick wall like a rag doll. Rubble rained down, burying his legs. The Green Goblin landed, retracting his glider. He walked toward the broken hero, malice dripping from every step. Ha ha ha, where is your strength now, Spider-Man? Where are your quips? The goblin stomped on Spider-Man's chest, pinning him. He reached down and ripped the tattered mask off Peter Parker's face. Peter, Norman Osborn hissed, his face twisted in hate. You treacherous insect. Harry treated you like a brother. And you steal his father's attention? You steal his girl. Peter, bleeding and concussed, looked up at the nightmarish face of his best friend's father. Mr. Osborn. Peter whispered, horrified. You're the goblin. I am the truth. Norman screamed. He pulled 3 pumpkin bombs from his satchel and armed them. The lights blinked ominously. Goodbye, Peter Parker. He tossed the bombs. Peter stared at the glowing death. He couldn't move. His body was broken. Is this it? Peter thought bitterly. Is this how a hero dies? He thought of Uncle Ben. He thought of One Punch Man. He wasn't Saitama. He didn't have the power to end it in one punch. He was just a kid from Queens who tried too hard. Damn it, Light, Peter thought deliriously. You draw so slowly. I'll never see the ending of OPM. Burn a copy for me in the afterlife, will you? He closed his eyes, waiting for the end. Clang! A metallic ring echoed through the warehouse. The pumpkin bombs didn't explode. Something had deflected them midair. The goblin's eyes widened. He dove backward, rolling away just as the bombs detonated harmlessly against a far wall. Boom! The firelight illuminated a petite figure standing on a rafter. She wore a purple wig, a black leather jacket, and a plaid skirt. A domino mask covered her eyes. In her hands, she held 2 razor-sharp blades connected to the bulky gear at her waist. Hey, you're Spider-Man, the girl chirped, her voice young and excited. Being a superhero looks super fun. Mindy McCready, aka Hit Girl, smiled beneath her mask. She had found the gear in a dumpster, figured out how it worked. She was a weapon prodigy, after all, and decided to take it for a test drive. Who knew Attack on Titan tech was real? The goblin narrowed his eyes. Who are you supposed to be? A lost trick-or-treater. I'm a superhero, Mindy announced, striking a pose. I'm Titan Girl? Or maybe Slash Girl. I'm working on the name. Run. Peter shouted weakly. He's dangerous. Dangerous. The goblin snarled. I am a god. He threw a pumpkin bomb at her. Mindy didn't flinch. She pressed the trigger on her hilt. PSSSHHH. Gas hissed from the tanks. The grappling hooks shot out, embedding into the concrete wall. The turbine spun, reeling her in with violent speed. She swung sideways, dodging the explosion with the grace of an acrobat, her blades glinting in the firelight. Little tricks, Green Goblin sneered, banking his glider around for another pass. Blades extended from the wings, gleaming with lethal intent. Mindy didn't panic. She squeezed the triggers on her hilt. Whoosh! The gas-powered turbines screamed. Mindy retracted her grapple lines, pulling herself toward the ceiling at breakneck speed. As she reached the apex of her swing, she fired another line, anchoring herself to a support beam. If you want to catch me, you'll have to be faster than that. Mindy laughed, feeling the adrenaline flood her system. This 3D maneuver gear is incredible, she thought. I feel just like Mikasa. Mindy idolized Mikasa Ackerman from Attack on Titan. The character was strong, stoic, and fiercely protective, everything Mindy aspired to be. Finding this gear felt like destiny. She had spent the last few days obsessively practicing the maneuvers she'd seen in the manga, and now, putting them to use in real combat, it felt natural. Like she was born to fly. What is this technology? Goblin muttered, trying to track the girl zipping around the warehouse like a hummingbird. Where is the propulsion source? Where is the fuel tank? Frustrated, the goblin unleashed a barrage from his glider's micro-machine guns. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat! A hail of bullets chased Mindy across the ceiling. She twisted her body in midair, using the gas bursts to change trajectory sharply. Bullets sparked against the steel beams inches from her face. Too slow, Mindy taunted. She swung between 2 pillars, her movements erratic and unpredictable. As she passed the goblin, she threw a small explosive disc, one of her own gadgets, onto the underside of his glider. Boom! It wasn't enough to destroy the glider, but the concussive force destabilized its flight path. The goblin wobbled, cursing. Damn brat! Goblin roared, his voice echoing off the walls. I just crushed Spider-Man. Do you think a little girl playing dress-up can stop me? I'm not playing. Mindy yelled back. Seizing the moment of the goblin's instability, she fired both grappling hooks into the ceiling directly above him. Gas burst? She swung down like a pendulum, drawing her dual blades. Clang! Her blade struck the goblin's helmet, sending sparks flying. The alloy held, but the kinetic impact was massive. The goblin was knocked off balance, spiraling out of control. He crashed into a stack of crates, his glider skidding across the floor. Oh yeah, Mindy cheered, landing gracefully on a crate. If only there was an audience to applaud. A silent victory feels kinda empty. The goblin groaned, pushing debris off his chest. He coughed, spitting blood inside his helmet. You, annoying, insect. He ripped off his damaged helmet, revealing the manic, bloodshot eyes of Norman Osborn. Why don't you surrender? Mindy asked, twirling her blades. You look tired, Grandpa. Surrender. Norman laughed, a dry, rasping sound. We all die together. He pressed a hidden switch on his wrist gauntlet. Click. A small, sleek missile deployed from the wreckage of the glider. This is a prototype bunker buster, Norman grinned, his teeth stained red. Blast radius, 20 meters. Core temperature, hot enough to turn this entire building into dust. Goodbye, little girl. He hit the launch button. Whoosh, the missile shot forward. At this range less than 5 meters there was no time to dodge. Even with the gear, Mindy couldn't outrun the blast radius. Time seemed to slow down. Mindy watched the missile approach, the tip glowing with impending death. She saw Peter Parker's unconscious form in the corner. I messed up, she thought, fear finally piercing her confidence. I'm going to die. Just as despair set in, a bored, sweet voice echoed through the warehouse. That 3D maneuver gear looks fun. Suddenly, a sphere of swirling purple darkness materialized between Mindy and the missile. Thwoom. There was no explosion. No fire. No shockwave. The missile flew into the purple void and simply vanished. The energy of the blast was swallowed whole, leaving only a dull, muffled pop like a cork being pulled from a bottle. Impossible. Norman screamed, his eyes bulging. That was enough yield to level a city block? Where did it go? Mindy trembled, staring at the figure that had stepped out of the shadows. A little girl in a purple dress stood there, looking utterly unimpressed. She licked frosting off her fingers. I am Golly, the girl said. She pointed a sticky finger at Mindy. Where did you get that gear? Mindy stammered, terrified. She had just witnessed a nuke get eaten. I found it in a trash bag. I swear. Trash bag. Golly tilted her head. Wait. Trash bag. Light's bag. Norman Osborn, seeing his chance while the two girls were distracted, tried to crawl toward the exit. I will not die here. I am the goblin. I will return. Golly glanced at him. You're noisy. She flicked her wrist. A tiny speck of the purple void detached from the main sphere and shot toward Norman. Zip. It hit him in the chest. There was no scream. Norman Osborn didn't explode. He didn't burn. He simply ceased to exist. Matter, energy, soul all erased from reality in a nanosecond. Mindy's knees gave out. She slumped to the floor, shaking. He's gone, Mindy whispered. Golly. Light and Gwen ran into the warehouse. They had heard the fighting and rushed in. Gwen, check on Spider-Man. Light ordered. Gwen ran to Peter's unconscious body. Light walked over to Golly and the terrified girl in the 3D gear. No, Light, I'm making friends. Golly beamed, putting on her best innocent smile. We were just playing. Light raised an eyebrow, looking at the crater where the goblin used to be. He looked at Mindy. Is that true? Mindy nodded frantically, terrified that Golly would eat her next. Yes, we're best friends. BFFs. Right, Light drawled. Golly, what is her name? Golly stalled. I just met her today. Light looked at the gear Mindy was wearing. He recognized it immediately. It was the set he had thrown away. Of course, Light thought. I throw away dangerous tech, and a hit girl wannabe finds it. Classic Marvel luck. If he admitted it was his, he'd have to explain too much to Gwen. Well, Light said loudly, for Gwen's benefit. It looks like some genius inventor threw away a prototype. Lucky find. He turned to Mindy. What's your name, kid? Mindy McCready, she squeaked. She recognized Light. He was the guy who had massacred the mobsters at the Frank D'Amico building. The one-punch guy. She was trapped between a god-tier monster girl and a superhuman martial artist. Light. Gwen called out. Spider-Man, it's Peter. He's hurt bad. Light walked over. Peter looked like hamburger meat. But Light could see the bruises already yellowing. His healing factor was working overtime. We can't call an ambulance, Light said. His identity would be exposed. I'll take him to a safe place. Gwen, you take the girls and get out of here. Outside the warehouse. As they walked away from the scene, Golly and Mindy trailed behind Gwen. Was that fun? Golly asked quietly. It was, okay, Mindy whispered, still wary. Golly stopped and held out her hand. Let's be friends. For real. Mindy looked at the hand. She was a lonely kid. Her dad trained her to be a killer, not a friend. She didn't have anyone her age. My name is Golly. What about you? Mindy hesitated, then took Golly's hand. I'm Mindy. And just like that, the deadliest playdate in New York history began. The next morning. Good morning, Lorna. Light walked into the kitchen, yawning. Lorna was already up, packing a lunchbox. Good morning, Light, she smiled brightly. Where's Golly? Light asked, looking around. Is she still sleeping? She came back really late last night, Lorna said. She said she was playing with a new friend. Light sighed. After dropping Peter off on Aunt May's roof, with a note and some first aid, and sending Gwen home in a cab, he had lost track of Golly. That girl. Light rubbed his temples. Comment. 7 comment. Vote. Chapter 25, issue number 25, The Cat from the Future. It's good that Golly is making friends, Lorna said, a genuine smile softening her usually guarded expression. She watched the closed door of Golly's room, knowing the little glutton was likely still asleep after her late-night adventure. For Lorna, seeing Golly act like a normal child albeit one with terrifying power was heartwarming. It validated her decision to stay. A stable home, a high salary, and a strange but caring family dynamic were more than she could have ever hoped for. Yes, Light agreed, sketching rapidly on his drafting table. It would be boring for her to watch the children's animation channel all day. Plus, having a friend like Mindy, well, at least they can relate to each other's violent tendencies. Are you talking ill of me? The bedroom door creaked open. A small head with messy purple hair poked out from the crack, eyes narrowing suspiciously. Light didn't even look up. Go wash your face, you gremlin. Breakfast is on the table. Golly huffed but shuffled to the bathroom. A few minutes later, she emerged, fresh-faced and hungry. She grabbed the breakfast sandwich Light had bought and flopped onto the sofa, turning on the TV. Welcome to the American Morning News. Here are the top news for today. Norman Osborn missing. The chairman of Oscorp has not been seen for 24 hours. With Tony Stark also missing, rumors of corporate kidnapping are swirling. Terror on the bridge. Last night, the supercriminal Green Goblin attacked the Queensboro Bridge. Spider-Man intervened, but the outcome of their battle remains unknown. However, witnesses report seeing the wall-crawler active in Manhattan this morning. Military action. General Ross has deployed a large-scale task force to the Nevada desert. Sources cite live-fire exercises, but unconfirmed reports mention a green giant. Space mission. Reed Richards and his team Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm along with Victor Von Doom, are scheduled to launch this afternoon. They aim to study a cosmic storm to unlock the secrets of human evolution. Boring, Golly yawned, changing the channel to cartoons. Why is human news always about fighting or flying? Light chuckled. Says the girl who ate a missile last night. Golly ignored him. She quietly padded over to Light's desk, peeking over his shoulder. He was drawing something new. The protagonist wasn't a superhero or a titan. It was a teenager with orange hair, carrying a massive kitchen knife on his back. Kurosaki Ichigo, Light thought as he inked the blade. This huge sword is going to be a pain to draw repeatedly. He looks funny, Golly critiqued, leaning in. Why is his sword so big? Compensating, Light muttered, not breaking his flow. Why don't you go play with Mindy? Golly's face fell. She slumped her shoulders. Mindy went to school. We made a pinky promise not to disturb her during class. School. Light paused. An idea sparked. He put down his pen and turned to her. That's it. You should go to school too. Me. Golly blinked. Yes. With Mindy. That way, you won't be bored all day, and you won't disturb her. School. Golly's eyes lit up. Is there food at school? Lorna, who was inking a page of Tokyo Ghoul, interjected thoughtfully. Light? Schools usually don't allow eating in class. And Golly eats, constantly. Golly froze. Her eyes went wide with horror. No eating? For hours. That's right, Light nodded solemnly. It's a strict rule. No snacks. No cakes. Just learning. No. Golly wailed, throwing herself onto the floor. That's hell? That's worse than the void? I won't go. I won't. Light and Lorna exchanged amused glances. Fine, fine, Light sighed. No school for you. But you can't just loaf around. Golly rolled around on the floor for a bit longer, then sat up, pouting. Light. I have an idea. What? I want to draw. Light stared at her. You? Draw. Yes? I want to draw comics too. It looks fun. Pfft. Lorna stifled a laugh. Imagine Golly drawing. I can do it. Golly puffed out her cheeks. Teach me. Give me a story. Light rubbed his chin. Well, your art skills are non-existent. But if you just trace my projections, maybe. He thought for a moment. What kind of manga would suit Golly? Something simple. Something episodic. Something about food and gadgets. All right, Light said. I have the perfect series for you. It's simple, iconic, and doesn't require complex anatomy. What is it? Golly asked, excited. It's about a cat. A cat. A blue robot cat from the future. Light pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. He closed his eyes, activating the system. Ghost Trace, Doraemon. He projected the image onto the paper. What appeared wasn't a brooding hero or a terrifying monster. It was a round, blue creature with a red nose, whiskers, and a bell around its neck. It had no ears. This is a cat. Lorna looked over, confused. It looks like a blue raccoon. It's Doraemon, Light explained. He's a robot sent from the 22nd century to help a hopeless kid named Nobita. He projected the next panel, a boy with glasses crying and running home, shouting, Doraemon, help me. This Nobita guy looks like a loser, Golly critiqued instantly. He is, Light agreed. That's the point. Nobita fails at everything, so Doraemon uses gadgets from the future to help him. He projected a scene where Doraemon reaches into his 4D pocket. Wait, Lorna said, leaning in. He's from the future? What kind of technology does he have? In the Marvel universe, future tech usually meant lasers or flying cars. Lorna was curious. Light smiled. See for yourself. In the comic, Nobita was crying about an upcoming exam he hadn't studied for. Doraemon sighed and pulled out a slice of bread. Memory bread. Nobita, just press this bread onto the page of your textbook. The text will transfer to the bread. Then, you eat it. You'll remember everything written on it. Nobita grabbed the bread, pressed it onto his history book, and ate it. Instantly, he could recite the facts perfectly. Wow, Lorna whispered. That's amazing. If I had that, I could have actually passed school instead of sneaking into libraries. For a homeless runaway, an item that let you learn instantly was a dream come true. Golly, however, was outraged. That's not science, she shouted, pointing at the paper. That's black magic? How does eating ink transfer data to the brain? Where is the neural interface? Where is the data compression algorithm? Light laughed. It's not hard sci-fi, Golly. It's Doraemon. It's fantasy logic. It's irrational. Golly huffed. Light ignored her outburst. Doraemon was full of items that defied logic: the anywhere door, the bamboo copter, the time furoshiki. In a universe like Marvel, where infinity stones existed, a blue robot cat wasn't that far-fetched. The anywhere door is basically the space stone, Light noted. And the time machine is, well, Doom probably has one. So, Light looked at Golly. Do you want to draw this? The lines are simple circles and curves. Perfect for a beginner. Golly looked at the round, blue cat. It was eating a dorayaki, bean paste bun, in one panel. He eats snacks, Golly noted approvingly. I like him. Okay, I'll draw the blue raccoon. Great, Light smiled. Lorna, you handle the inking. Golly, you trace the lines. I'll focus on the main projects. Light, Golly tugged on his sleeve. Can you make a real Doraemon? Maybe one day, Light teased. If you work hard enough. Humph, you're boasting. Scratch scratch. Golly, with her tongue sticking out in concentration, dragged the pen across the white paper. Slowly, the story of Doraemon, or as she called him, Blue Raccoon, began to take shape. Light stood behind her, watching the progress. Golly had zero artistic foundation, so her lines were blunt and simple. But for a slice-of-life comedy like Doraemon, which relied on round shapes and minimal dynamic action, it worked. If this were a battle shonen, the readers would riot. But for a gag manga about a robot cat, it had charm. Buzz. Light's phone vibrated on the desk. He glanced at the caller ID, Uncle Andy. He stepped out of the study, leaving Golly and Lorna to their work. Hello, Light? The manuscripts are due tomorrow for printing. Andy's voice was frantic. Monday is the release day for the 3rd issue of Shonen Jump. And you mentioned a new magazine? What is the situation? I haven't heard from you in days. Andy had been trying to be respectful of Light's creative process, but the deadline was looming like a guillotine. He needed to know if they actually had content to print. Don't worry, Uncle Andy, Light said calmly. Come over to the apartment. I have everything ready. We need to talk about the expansion. 30 minutes later, Andy arrived at the loft, looking out of breath. He walked into the living room and froze. On the coffee table, there wasn't just one stack of manuscripts. There were distinct piles everywhere. Light. Andy stammered, pointing at the table. How many books are you launching? 6 new titles, Light said casually, pouring a cup of tea. Actually, 7 if you count the one-shot. 7. Andy's voice cracked. Are you crazy? Do you want to die from overwork? I promised your parents I'd take care of you, not watch you draw yourself into an early grave. I'm not doing it alone, Light smiled. He looked toward the study door, which was cracked open. You can come out now. Lorna and Golly shuffled out, looking sheepish. Andy, meet my assistants, Light introduced. Lorna Dane and Golly. Andy stared at the two girls. One looked like a runaway teenager, and the other looked like she belonged in elementary school. These two, Andy whispered, skeptical. Don't let their looks fool you, Light said. They are highly efficient. Now, let's look at the lineup. Light handed Andy the first stack. These two will be the new pillars of Shonen Jump, Light explained. Unlike the previous titles, these are long-running epics. Andy flipped through the pages. The art style was sharp, dynamic, and undeniably professional. The setting is intricate, Andy muttered, scanning the dialogue. Ninjas, and soul reapers? This is going to take a long time to unfold. Exactly, Light nodded. Both Naruto and Bleach are estimated to have nearly 700 chapters each. These are slow-burn epics that will run for years. 700 chapters. Andy dropped the manuscript, his face pale. Light, the longest comic currently running is Captain America, and even that gets rebooted every few years. Readers don't have that kind of attention span. They don't have it yet, Light corrected. We are building it. Trust me, Andy sighed, rubbing his temples. He knew arguing was pointless. Light had a vision, and so far, that vision had been profitable. Fine. What about the other piles? Those are for the new magazine, Light said. It will be sold alongside Shonen Jump as a weekly anthology. It's called Weekly Shonen Sunday. Weekly Shonen Sunday. Andy raised an eyebrow. While Jump focuses on friendship, effort, victory, essentially hot-blooded action, Sunday will be broader. It will feature comedy, sci-fi, and slice of life. It's for everyone. Light pointed to the two piles Andy was holding. So the comics placed here are very different from Jump. This is the draft for the first issue of Sunday. Andy picked up 2 drawings. One had the familiar round blue raccoon cat on the title page. The other was a sudden shift in style, becoming gritty and realistic. It featured a muscular man wearing sunglasses, raising a shotgun. In the background, terrifying metallic skeletons with red eyes were closing in. It seems that you were really prepared. Andy couldn't help but smile after flipping through them. Someone will buy these 2 books because of your current reputation. But if you treated these 4 as a debut without your name attached, I'm sure no one would read them at all. Now the market was too deformed, but Light had become a brand name with his epic work. Monday morning, the release. Andre, a rival editor at a major publishing house, walked down the street with a smug smile. Since Marvel's Shonen Jump had exploded onto the scene, his own magazine sales had plummeted. But Andre wasn't worried. He knew the industry. No single artist could maintain the quality of 3 weekly serials for long. Eventually, Light Inksworth would burn out, the art would degrade, and the fans would return to the familiar comfort of superhero comics. When that happened, Andre planned to hire a legion of online trolls to bury Marvel's reputation. Why is it so crowded? Andre stopped. The bookstore ahead was swarming with people. It looked like a riot. What's going on? Andre asked a teenager who was squeezing his way out of the crush. 2 new comics dropped, the kid shouted, waving a glossy magazine. And Marvel released a whole new anthology. I need a copy of Sunday, someone screamed from the back of the line. Give me Jump? I need to see if Kaneki eats the guy. Andre pushed his way to the front. He looked at the promotional posters plastered on the windows. On the left, a boy with spiky blonde hair and whiskers, housing a nine-tailed fox. Naruto. On the right, an orange-haired teenager with a giant sword, facing a masked hollow monster. Bleach. Andre froze. He hadn't expected Light to take on 2 more serializations, considering he was already drawing 3. And now, it's 5 serializations. It was impossible. Unless he had a team of 50 artists, no human could produce this much content. Sir, are you going to buy or just stand there? The clerk snapped. Andre numbly handed over the cash. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He opened the plastic seal of Shonen Jump. He checked the credits. Story and art, Light Inksworth. Assistance, Lorna D. Golly. Assistance. Andre muttered. So he finally got help. He flipped through the pages. The quality hadn't dropped. If anything, the backgrounds were more detailed, the shading more precise. Boss, Andre called his superior on his cell phone, his voice shaking. We need to do something. Marvel they're overwhelming the market. Can't our artists compete? The boss asked. No, Andre admitted. We don't have anything like this. Fine, the boss growled. If we can't beat them creatively, we'll beat them physically. I'll make a call. Andre hung up, a cruel smile returning to his face. You're done, kid. Bump. Andre collided with someone. He looked up to see a familiar face. Edward. Andre put on his fake smile. Are you here to review our latest issue of Ultra Force? Edward Vance, the famous critic, laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. Sorry, Andre. I don't review recycled garbage anymore. I'm waiting for real innovation. Edward brushed past him, grabbing a copy of Shonen Jump and Weekly Shonen Sunday. He didn't even look back. Andre stood there, his face turning green with rage. Edward's review. Edward sat at a cafe table, his coffee forgotten. He opened Shonen Jump to One Punch Man. The story had reached a critical point. The House of Evolution arc was concluding, and the terrifying Azura Kabuto, a dragon-level threat, was rampaging. The art was visceral, the action kinetic. Now, Edward muttered, turning the page. The secret. How did Saitama become so strong? In the comic, Genos leaned forward, his mechanical eyes glowing. Sensei, tell me the secret of your power. Saitama's face turned serious. The art style shifted to intense, dramatic shading. Listen, Genos. You have to train until your hair falls out. Edward leaned in, his heart pounding. What was it? Genetic modification? Cosmic radiation? Magic? Saitama shouted. 100 push UPS? 100 sit UPS? 100 squats? And a 10-kilometer run? Every single day. Edward stared at the page. He blinked. He read it again. That's just a standard workout, Edward whispered, dumbfounded. In the comic, Genos screamed, that's just normal strength training. Don't mess with me. I'm not messing with you. Saitama yelled back. That's really all I did. Edward slumped back in his chair, laughing uncontrollably. He's serious. He's actually serious? Suddenly, Saitama's face went blank in the next panel. Wait, isn't today the supermarket sale day? Wham. With one punch, Azura Kabuto was obliterated because Saitama was worried about missing a discount on cabbage. Brilliant, Edward wiped a tear from his eye. Absolutely brilliant. Some fans who are addicted to comics still experiment quietly, thinking, what if I do Saitama's workout too? How strong would I be? Peter Parker, wearing his Spider-Man suit, squatted on the roof of a high-rise building. He eagerly looked around to ensure he was alone. Although no one could see his face, performing these exercises in broad daylight was still a bit embarrassing. Peter condensed his thoughts and prepared to practice secretly at night. Would I go bald by doing these exercises? I really hope not. More power is much appreciated though, he wondered. Last time he was defeated by Green Goblin, Peter, who desperately wanted power, had fallen into deep thought. He needed to be stronger to protect the ones he loved. He flipped through the rest of Shonen Jump. A new character appeared in the 12th chapter of One Punch Man, Speedo Sound Sonic. Under Light's depiction, his speed seemed incredible. What disappointed Peter was that this ninja was defeated with one punch, well, a chop to the groin, and then there was a long wait for the next chapter. The new issues of Attack on Titan and Tokyo Ghoul made Peter feel a little uncomfortable. The former described what happened to Mikasa in her childhood, forcing her to realize that the world is cruel. The latter made him even more horrified. The newly introduced gourmet ghoul, Shuitsukiyama, ran a restaurant that provided various cuisines made from humans. Light is a pervert, Peter shuddered. Does he really have to draw it like this? Peter's ideals were extremely incompatible with the dark world shown in Tokyo Ghoul. He hastily flipped past it to check out the new comics. The colorful title page showed a dark night where a huge fox wreaked havoc on a village. The fox that caught his attention had 9 tails and looked vicious. There was a caption beside it. Peter murmured as he read. In the old days, there was a demon fox that harmed the world, known as the 9 Tails. When the fox waved its tails, it caused landslides and tsunamis. There was a ninja who sacrificed his life to seal it away, dying from exhaustion. This ninja was called the 4th Hokage. Naruto. Ninja? Is it Japanese ninjutsu? Peter murmured softly and turned to the next page. This was the beginning of the text, and the headline was simple and clear, Uzumaki Naruto. It should be the protagonist's name. At the beginning of the manga, someone appeared in front of an old man and shouted, Lord Hokage? Naruto is playing a prank again. He's painting on the great stone faces of the past Hokages. This old man, the 3rd Hokage, sighed, that kid is making trouble again. Peter's interest was immediately piqued. A mischievous protagonist was rarely seen in serious comics. As he read on, he saw that Naruto didn't know he was wrong after being caught. Instead, he was rather proud. Others couldn't deface the monument under heavy security, but he did it. This implied a very high level of skill, which made Peter chuckle. Peter didn't hate such a protagonist. On the contrary, this kind of unassuming and energetic underdog was more popular with Americans. Then Naruto was tied up by his teacher, Iruka, who punished the class with a surprise test on the transformation technique. It's interesting, this transformation technique, Peter laughed. Naruto didn't transform into his teacher like the others. Instead, he used his sexy jutsu, causing Iruka to spray a nosebleed. Peter couldn't help but laugh out loud. Afterward, Iruka ordered Naruto to clean up the graffiti on the Hokage monument. Naruto said it was fine because he was alone anyway. Just this sentence made Peter's heart throb. Is he an orphan? Later, Naruto shouted with confidence in the Ichiraku ramen shop, I will become Hokage. I'll be recognized by the whole village and become the strongest Hokage, surpassing all previous generations. A dream. Peter raised his head and looked at the blue sky. His dream was to save more people, but he didn't seem to have the same unwavering confidence as Naruto. It seems to be a positive comic book. Edward Vance nodded to himself in a building in the distance, taking a sip of coffee. Then the plot suddenly shifted. Naruto, who failed the clone technique exam, sat alone on a swing in the distance. There was a huge contrast between his loneliness and the excitement of his classmates who passed the exam to become genin. At the same time, parents whispered in the background. This kid failed again. It's better this way. It would be terrible if he became a ninja. Edward frowned. This mischievous teenager not only had no parents but was isolated by the entire village. A heavy feeling filled his heart, and Edward continued to read. Under Mizuki's persuasion, Naruto stole the scroll of seals. In reality, Mizuki wanted to frame Naruto and escape with the scroll himself. Iruka chased after him. Naruto was convinced that by learning a technique from the scroll, he would be allowed to graduate. Just then, Mizuki revealed a shocking secret. Naruto, you are the demon fox? You killed Iruka's parents and destroyed the village? That is the truth that has been forbidden for 12 years. So that's it. Edward suddenly realized why Naruto was isolated. Many people in the village held a grudge against the demon fox. Naturally, as the vessel, Naruto suffered from their cold glares. So in order to get attention, he played pranks. His seemingly indifferent heart was actually in great pain. The story continued. Naruto collapsed upon hearing the truth. Mizuki took the opportunity to throw a huge shuriken to kill him, but at that moment, Iruka threw himself in front of Naruto, taking the blade in his back. Edward saw the clever use of the transformation technique in the earlier battle and couldn't help admiring the imagination of the author, Light Inksworth. In the manga, Iruka was injured and pinned against a tree by Mizuki. Naruto was hiding behind the tree, listening. Iruka, you are too stupid. If that monster learns the ninjutsu from the scroll, he will use it to destroy the village. No, Naruto worked hard. Although he is clumsy and mischievous, he is not the demon fox. He is a member of Konoha. He is Uzumaki Naruto. Iruka shouted solemnly, denying Mizuki's hatred. Behind the tree, Naruto couldn't help crying, tears streaming down his face. Seeing this, even Edward's eyes, usually hardened by cynicism, started to moisten. It is always true feelings that move people. I think I am still affected after reading thousands of comics. Edward wiped the corners of his eyes and sighed from the bottom of his heart. At the climax of the chapter, Mizuki was about to kill Iruka, but he was defeated by an angry Naruto using the multiple shadow clone technique. Thousands of clones filled the forest, beating Mizuki to a pulp. In the end, Iruka gave Naruto his own forehead protector, signifying his graduation. It's over. There were 60 pages in this chapter. Edward saw Iruka taking Naruto to eat ramen in the final panel and reluctantly closed the issue. He reached for the next new manga. He opened a document on his computer, his fingers clattering across the keyboard. Every time he finished a good comic, he wrote the review immediately before starting the next one, so the emotions wouldn't blend. This had been his habit for many years. There was no doubt that this was a moving and humorous comic. Edward could conclude that from the first chapter alone. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. This setting is interesting. After Professor Charles Xavier finished his classes, he sat alone in his office and picked up the 2 comic magazines Jean Grey had just bought. One of the comics made his eyes shine. Kurosaki Ichigo was a high school student who liked to fight but had a secret. He had been able to see ghosts since he was a child. One night, he met a girl who called herself a Soul Reaper from the Soul Society. Her name was Rukia Kukaki, and she had come to Karakura Town to exterminate evil spirits known as Hollows. When the two met, she used a spell called Kido that only Soul Reapers could use. Then Rukia used terrible drawings to explain the concept of holes and hollows, and the duty of a Soul Reaper. It was at this time that a hollow attacked. Charles looked at the creature. Like Ichigo in the comic, he initially thought it might be human, but it was a monstrous beast wearing a bone mask. Rukia fell into a bitter battle protecting the Kurosaki family. Desperate, she offered to transfer her powers to Ichigo. He resolutely stabbed himself with her sword, becoming a Soul Reaper, and defeated the hollow with a massive blade. As the first chapter of Bleach ended, Professor Charles closed the magazine and thought to himself, Bleach doesn't seem as emotionally moving as Naruto, nor is it as philosophical as Tokyo Ghoul or Attack on Titan, but it is very similar to One Punch Man. It wasn't a satire, but it had a wild, uninhibited style. The setting of souls and the afterlife was fascinating. I always feel that the mutant gift comes from the soul, not just the genes, Charles mused. This comic tells a story of the soul, which is quite inspiring. After thinking for a while, Charles opened Weekly Shonen Sunday. The first thing that came into view was a white and blue cat. This is very educational. He saw the story where Nobita, unprepared for an exam, went to Shizuka to show off his memory skills using the bread, only to eat too much and lose everything due to diarrhea. The black technology of the memory bread wasn't what caught Charles's attention, but the lesson behind it. There was no violence, no dark reflection on society, only happiness and a simple moral lesson. This is a comic that can accompany countless people through their childhood. Charles made his decision. He projected a mental thought, Jean. Professor, what's the matter? Jean Grey, who was flipping through her own copy of the magazine, heard the professor's voice in her mind. When you have time, buy 10 more copies of Weekly Shonen Sunday. 10 copies? Why? I think the younger children need it. Especially kids like Jenny. They should read the manga called Doraemon. Jenny was the youngest girl in the school, only 8 years old, and often frightened by her powers. Okay, Professor. After Jean cut the telepathic link, Charles began to read the second feature in Sunday. Clatter. Charles knocked on the table lightly after reading the 3 chapters of The Terminator. He shook his head, feeling disappointed. Why does this feel ordinary? Light drew so many unique comics, but this one seems generic. It described a future world controlled by robots known as Skynet. The machines wanted to exterminate mankind but faced stubborn resistance led by John Connor. As a result, Skynet sent a Terminator robot, the T-800, back to 1984 to kill Connor's mother, Sarah, to prevent his birth. This time travel plot wasn't uncommon in Charles's opinion. Many superhero comics involved time travel and dystopian futures, like Days of Future Past. Compared to the innovation of Naruto or Doraemon, this felt cliched. Charles was a little confused. It was too ordinary. Light Inksworth, far away in Hell's Kitchen, would have laughed if he knew Charles's thoughts. The Terminator was a famous science fiction film series in his past life. It was a masterpiece of cinema. However, its impact relied heavily on special effects, Arnold Schwarzenegger's presence, and the novelty of the era. As a silent comic in 2008, Marvel, a world where Tony Stark was building suits and Reed Richards was going to space, killer robots weren't exactly groundbreaking. Naturally, it seemed unremarkable. Light did not publish this comic to earn massive fan value. His goal was different. He wanted to extract Skynet. Late at night. Light, why have you been in the bathroom for so long? Golly knocked on the door, her voice muffled through the wood. Light scrubbed his hands vigorously in the sink, feeling slightly breathless. I'll be out in a minute. Creak. Light wiped his hands on a towel and walked into the bedroom, ignoring Golly's puffed-up cheeks. You're suspicious. Golly narrowed her eyes. Are you hiding snacks in there? Or did you just crawl out of a dungeon? Go to sleep, Golly, Light sighed, shooing her away. He sat down in his chair, taking a deep breath. The blue system interface popped up in front of him. Fan value, 2,050,000. Light felt a thrill of nervousness. He had over 2 million points. He had saved up since last week, resisting the urge to spend. System, adjust specifications. I want to try all tiers. 1 draw at 100,000. 1 at 300,000. 1 at 500,000. And finally, 1 at 1,000,000,000. Specifications adjusted. Initiate lottery. Start. Light decided to warm up with the lower tiers first. Ding. Congratulations, host. Obtained, Nobita's glasses, Doraemon. A pair of round, thick-rimmed glasses appeared in the air. Light tossed them directly into the trash can. Useless. Ding. Congratulations, host. Obtained, Survey Corps uniform, Attack on Titan. A set of clothes floated down a light brown jacket with the wings of freedom embroidered on the back, and a green cloak. Light didn't throw this one away. He put it on the table. Golly seems to like cosplay lately, he thought. She was playing with Mindy using the 3D maneuver gear the other day. She might like this. The 100,000 tier was mostly junk items. Light figured the pool for good items at this level was diluted. Next. 300,000 tier. The wheel spun gold. Ding! Congratulations host. Obtained, Kankanaki Fragment X2, Kakuhao Fragment X1. A pulsating lump of flesh and 2 puzzle pieces appeared. Light dragged them into his warehouse without a word. He still had no desire to become a ghoul. Next. 500,000 tier. This was usually where the good stuff was. Ding! Congratulations host. Obtained Azura Kabuto skill set, Monstrous Power Fragment X1, Agility Fragment X1, Azura Mode Fragment X2, 2 passive skill fragments and 1 active skill fragment. The monstrous power and agility fragments turned into red and green rays of light, pouring into Light's body. It felt like soaking in a hot spring. He took a deep breath as his muscles grew denser and his nerves fired faster. His monstrous power was now level 2, dragon level potential, and his agility was level 3. However, the crimson light emitted by the Azura mode fragments made Light uncomfortable. It looked ominous. Azura mode fragment, great anger brings terrifying strength. The more fragments collected, the stronger the boost, but the user risks losing their sanity to bloodlust. Light touched his chin. Basically, a berserker mode. Since it's an active skill, I'll install it. Better to have it and not need it. The fascinating red light turned into a meteor and entered Light's mind. A new icon appeared in the active skill panel, a roaring monster silhouette. Now for the big one. 1 million points. This was his biggest gamble yet. Half his remaining fortune on a single spin. Start. The wheel spun so fast it blurred into a ring of white light. Light watched the numbers tick down. Ding! Congratulations host! Grand prize bundle obtained. Obtained, Skynet AI Fragment X2 obtained, Multiple Shadow Clone Jutsu Fragment X5 obtained, Konoha Forward Protector X1 obtained, Genos Power Core X2 obtained, Kankanaki Fragment X2 obtained, Saitama Fragment X1 obtained, Shunpo, Flash Step, Fragment X1 obtained, Bakudo number 1, Sai, Restrain. Hiss, Light sucked in a breath of cold air. His heart hammered against his ribs like a drum. Jackpot. Except for the Forward Protector, everything here was gold. 1 million points well spent. System prompt, synthesizable items detected. Auto-synthesizing. Light watched as a dim battery flew out of his warehouse. It merged with the 2 new power cores. Flash. In a dazzling brilliance, the 3 batteries collided. A gleaming blue sphere of energy emerged, encased in a sleek, flesh-colored metallic shell with exposed wiring. Genos Power Core. Complete the core energy device of the cyborg Genos. Capable of generating immense energy output for weaponry like the incineration cannon. Can be upgraded. Light held the Azure Sphere. It felt cool to the touch, humming with dormant power. This is not a biological heart, Light noted. It's an engine. I can't put this inside me, but I can use it to power external devices. He thought of the Terminator fragments. If I complete Skynet, maybe I can build a Terminator body and install this core and the incineration cannon. A cyborg bodyguard would be useful. He stored the core and looked at the Skynet AI fragments. They looked like black floppy disks. He needed more to complete the AI. Next, his eyes fell on the blue skill fragment, Shunpo, Flash Step. Shunpo fragment, a movement technique from Bleach. Allows the user to move faster than the eye can follow. Can stack with other high-speed movement skills, example body flicker technique. Equip. The fragment turned into blue light and shot into his legs. System prompt, skill stacking active. Agility plus Shunpo equals enhanced mobility. Light stood up. He focused his intent. Zip. He disappeared from his chair and reappeared by the window instantly. To a normal human eye, he would have simply vanished. It feels easy, Light whispered. Like slipping through the air. His mobility had now exceeded human limits. He wasn't just fast, he was a blur. Next, he clicked on Bakudo number 1, Sai. Bakudo number 1, Sai. Restrain a Kido spell that locks a target's arms behind their back. Requires spiritual pressure to maintain. Equip. This was a useful capture tool. He didn't always want to punch enemies into red mist. Sometimes, he just needed to arrest them. Finally, Light looked at the most important prize. Multiple Shadow Clone Jutsu Fragment X5. This was it. The holy grail of productivity. Multiple Shadow Clone Jutsu creates solid copies of the user. Experience and memories gained by the clones are transferred to the original upon dispersal. No upper limit on clones, but consumes stamina, converted from chakra. Stamina instead of chakra, Light noted. That makes sense. My regeneration and toughness skills give me superhuman stamina, so I should be able to maintain quite a few clones. He had purposefully drawn Naruto with a focus on this jutsu in the first chapter. He knew the lottery favored elements from recent chapters. This changes everything, Light grinned. Being a manga artist was exhausting. Drawing, inking, plotting even with tracing, it was a grind. But with shadow clones, he could have one clone drawing Naruto, one drawing Bleach, one drawing Doraemon, and the original body could go out and enjoy life. Or train. Or sleep. And the experience transfer. Light realized. If 5 clones practice drawing for an hour, I get 5 hours of practice in 1 hour. My actual art skills will skyrocket. Comment. 8 comment. Vote. Chapter 29, Issue number 29, The Shadow of the Empire. Fortunately, the art studio was spacious enough to accommodate the growing team. There were 3 large drafting tables set up, one for each person. Golly and Lorna were seated closer together, while Light's station was positioned slightly behind them. The projection screens from the system were now hardened and distinct. Light had intentionally separated the interfaces, mapping the traces step by step according to the established plan for each artist. Golly was vividly tracing the outline of the characters onto the drawing paper. She worked with a surprising amount of artistic flair. Her lack of artistic foundation actually worked in her favor for the simple, rounded style of Doraemon. If she didn't focus, the blue raccoon would look distorted, and she wouldn't be able to stand it. She didn't watch TV anymore. Instead, she was gradually indulging in the storyline of the comics she was creating, acting as a commentator for Lorna. Lorna, Golly whispered, look at this Nobita. He is really stupid. I really want a Doraemon. Scratch scratch. Lorna rolled her eyes but sat upright, smiling happily. While her hand moved the brush, inking the lines, she occasionally reached into a bag of potato chips, munching quietly. If you had a Doraemon, you'd probably just eat all his dorayaki. Light walked into the room. Don't let me hear you slacking off, Light said in a mock-stern voice, rubbing Golly's head affectionately. Remember, finish reading the chapter before you start drawing. I know. Golly grumbled, her pen moving rhythmically across the paper. The sound of pens scratching against paper filled the room a peaceful, productive hum. Light chose a comic page and was inking it. Lorna, at this moment, was also deeply focused on a new chapter of Bleach. She had read the story in her heart, and both of them understood the narrative flow during the drawing process. Lorna, are you too fascinated? You didn't hear the sound. Light's voice suddenly came from right in front of her. Lorna scratched her head in embarrassment and gave a shy hum. I guess so. After a while, Light's voice came from the side. Lorna brushed a stray hair from her face. Something was wrong. Light should be at the back table behind her. Why did his voice sound like it was coming from in front of her all of a sudden? It looks too fat. Who said that? He looks like this. Golly argued. Light walked backwards from Golly's desk. Lorna, who had him in her peripheral vision, didn't want to lift her head from the drawing. Shuffle. But then, there was an awkward sound coming from behind her. She couldn't help thinking about it. She reached out with her magnetic field sense. Oh, Golly, is your Doraemon's belly out of proportion? This line is off. Still 2 brushes. As soon as Lorna looked up, she saw Light standing at Golly's desk. I didn't mess it up, Golly said, looking a little guilty and denying it instantly. At this time, Lorna froze. Light was here, in front of her. So, what was going on behind her? Was it the same trick she used? Manipulating the metal behind the painting to move? Judging from the thickness and length she felt in the magnetic field, it should be a brush. She turned around, and she was stunned. There was another Light sitting at the back desk, drawing. 3 lights. All solid. All working at the same time. This. Lorna looked suspiciously between them. Light? What is going on? The 3 lights looked at her simultaneously and smiled. This, the Light at the desk said, is my new skill. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A few minutes later, the living room. The clones popped into smoke, their memories returning to the original body. Light lay on the sofa, his heart palpitating slightly from the fatigue, but he took a sip of coffee from the small table. He carefully squinted his eyes and watched the news in a leisurely manner. Welcome to the American Evening News. The following is today's report. Comic book craze, experts are calling it a renaissance. Marvel Comics has seen unprecedented sales figures this week. Long lines were reported outside comic shops across New York this morning. One of the new titles is suspected to involve mutant allegories, but the publishing company has not commented. Light listened to the news. He didn't feel any contempt for the sensationalism, because it was normal. It was a life-saving straw for the industry. The share of related industries in the American entertainment market is really unsightly, Light mused. A big-name cartoonist in this industry is not even as famous as an 18th-line singer. He thought about the adult population on the New York streets. Few people knew about Shonen Jump. The comics only had an audience among young people, and even then, it was less than 20% of the demographic. The TV news continued. Vigilante sightings. Police are investigating reports of a new vigilante operating in Manhattan. Witnesses describe a small figure moving with high-speed wires and jets, similar to Spider-Man but armed with blades. The individual reportedly calls herself Titan Girl or Superkiller. Mystery in Washington, D.C. Police found a body today completely drained of blood, with puncture marks on the neck. Authorities are baffled. Queens incident. Witnesses in Queens reported a bizarre altercation where a man allegedly used playing cards as lethal weapons. Light sat up. Playing cards. Memories resurfaced in his mind. Card games. Card duels. Wait, Light muttered. If people are fighting with cards, that sounds like Gambit. Or maybe Bullseye. But then a different idea struck him. An idea for expansion. The comic market in America was still relatively niche compared to the dominance of movies and TV. Even with his recent success, Light was only capturing a fraction of the potential audience. How do you get people who don't read comics to care about your characters? You give them a game. In his past life, the anime and manga industry was supported by a massive ecosystem of merchandise and games. Pokemon started as a game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was literally about a card game. Naruto has games. Bleach has games, Light mused. But developing a AAA console game takes years and millions of dollars. I don't have the resources yet. He needed something low cost, high impact, and easy to distribute. Cards, Light whispered, looking at the TV screen. Card games. Yu-Gi-Oh! The trading card game, TCG, market was a goldmine. It was portable, social, and addictive. And he didn't need a game engine to make it. He just needed to print paper. He picked up his phone and dialed Andy. Uncle Andy, it's me. I need you to set up a new department. Andy hadn't fallen asleep yet. He was surprised when he heard the words. A new department? Light, we just launched 2 magazines. Can we breathe for a second? No time to breathe, Light said. I'm going to serialize a new type of comic in the 4th issue of Shonen Jump. A game manga. A game manga. I'll draw 4 chapters and send them to you later. You will understand. It involves card battles. Okay. Andy sounded skeptical. But what about the current buzz? Fans online are arguing about who would win in a fight, Naruto or Ichigo. It's getting heated. It's a full-on fandom war. Shinobi versus Soul Reaper. Light's eyes lit up. They're fighting. Yeah, it's intense. Perfect, Light grinned. That gives me another idea. Andy, do we have anyone who can program software? Simple stuff. Flash games. Flash games? Yeah, we have a couple of guys in IT who dabble. Why? I want to make a mini-game for the official website. Bleach versus Naruto. What? A simple 2D fighting game. Pixel art. Fast-paced. We put it on the website for free. It will drive traffic like crazy. In his previous life, Bleach vs. Naruto was a legendary flash game on sites like 4399 and Newgrounds. It was simple, accessible, and incredibly popular among kids who couldn't afford consoles. That actually sounds brilliant, Andy admitted. It would settle the debates. Or fuel them. Exactly. I'll send the design specs. Get it done. Light hung up, feeling satisfied. Light was a little disgusted with the company's official website. The interface above was too simple. Marvel was the backbone of the industry at any rate. Having a bad website was too shameful. He lay back on the sofa like a lazy king. Shadow clones for drawing. Assistants for inking. Flash games for marketing. And soon, a trading card game empire. From the study, he heard Golly laughing as she played a game with Lorna. This, Light thought, closing his eyes, is the life. Raindrops fell relentlessly from the gloomy sky, washing over the steel and concrete jungle of New York. Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime, stood like a monolith in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. He looked down at everything within his line of sight, his expression shifting between cloudy contemplation and stormy rage. It was early morning, but there was no warm sun to greet the city. On the contrary, the sky was choked with dense, dark clouds. Boss, a subordinate said timidly, his voice trembling as he bowed his head. There has been no news from the police station. It seems that a federal agency has intervened. Our people on the inside have been warned to stay away. Fisk remained silent, but the air around him grew heavy with menace. Bullseye, his chief assassin, had died inexplicably. One moment he was a living weapon, and the next, he had been crushed against a wall as if hit by a high-speed train, his body embedded directly into the concrete. In other words, you found nothing. Fisk's voice was a low growl. The surveillance cameras had been destroyed instantly, as if struck by an invisible force or a precision laser. Fisk had hoped the police station would provide answers, but they were useless, and now his contacts there had been scared off. Fisk gripped his cane until his knuckles turned white. This was a sudden, violent slash at his authority. The incident had taken place in Hell's Kitchen, right under his nose, and yet no one knew who the murderer was. He didn't know what department was intervening. He had exhausted all his avenues: money, contacts, threats. The answers were silence. It wasn't just the FBI or the CIA, it felt like a massive spider web waiting for him to step in. He was the emperor of the underworld, yet he was being provoked, and he couldn't see his enemy. The key point was that as the largest criminal mastermind in the United States, Fisk managed his territory with an iron fist. He didn't believe for a second that someone wasn't watching him right now. But now that the enemy was unknown, he was forced into a passive position. The subordinate didn't dare say a word. He swallowed the blood in his mouth from where he had bitten his tongue in fear, making only a small squeak. This is absurd, Fisk muttered. What organization is this? Used to being the predator, Fisk began to feel the strain on his nerves. He hadn't slept well since the incident. His men were beaten for no reason, disabled on the spot. The only thing he could be sure of was that Bullseye was gone. Ring. The phone on his desk rang. At this moment, Fisk hesitated. He didn't know who the other party was. Was it an individual, or was it the entity that threatened to dismantle his empire? Fisk, who rarely smiled, was actually a capricious, cold-blooded, and cruel emperor. But he answered the phone with a tone that suggested he was dealing with a troublesome equal. Oh, it's you, Fisk said, his tone changing to a professional greeting, masking his earlier rage. No problem. I'm just running a small business here. It was a long phone call. He gestured for his subordinate to leave, and then continued the conversation. I haven't contacted him for a long time, Fisk mused into the receiver. It was an ally. Not a gang ally, but a legitimate business partner. His underworld empire controlled both black and white sectors, and there were rules that even the kingpin had to respect. After Fisk hung up the phone, he walked to the glass table and smashed a tumbler against it, no longer pretending to be calm. This ally was a major media conglomerate. They paid a significant share of protection fees every year in exchange for backing. In the eyes of these companies, going to the police when an accident occurred was useless. Using the kingpin as a backer was far more efficient. But even they couldn't help him now. Fisk lifted the heavy glass table and threw it across the room in a fit of rage. Surveillance safe house. Just around the building where Fisk was located, there were people wandering the streets. Their disguises were professional, blending in perfectly as tourists or workers, though their behavior was so calculated that the local gangsters sensed something was off. In a low-ceilinged room in a nearby alley, agents knocked on the door with a specific rhythmic code. Inside, a man sitting in a chair tapped his headset to communicate with his superior. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he signaled to the others. After a while, the door opened. Phil Carlson walked in. His face was indifferent as he straightened his suit and addressed the agents. Report, Carlson said efficiently. There were 7 or 8 agents like him here. No one spoke unnecessarily. The agents had maintained strict discipline for days, waiting for the plan to conclude or change. Nothing has happened since we found the clues last time, an agent reported. We've had a massive monitoring net focused here for days, and no suspicious individuals have been found. Fisk's security is tight. Carlson didn't doubt it. He had sent people to watch, hoping to see if there were any signs of the unknown entity returning to the scene. Fisk had guessed correctly. He was being watched by SHIELD. SHIELD had also collected information on everyone in Hell's Kitchen, but they did not expect to connect the dots to Fisk so easily. After Carlson finished receiving the report, he left quickly. He walked to a bookstore on the way, intending to buy the latest issue of Shonen Jump, acting as naturally as possible to blend in. Inside the store, he bumped into a blind man. "Excuse me," Carlson said politely. The clerk had mentioned this was Matt Murdoch, a local lawyer. Matt looked a little dazed and frowned, his head tilting as if listening to something specific like a heartbeat. Carlson quickly hid the comic magazine from view, using sleight of hand to conceal it within his jacket, and hurried back to the bus stop to return to headquarters. Nelson and Murdoch Law Office. Inside the law firm, Matt Murdoch sat on the worn sofa. "Frank, you can come in." The Punisher, Frank Castle, climbed in through the window, silent as a ghost. "The man who killed Bullseye," Frank said, his voice like gravel grinding together. Daredevil paused. Because he couldn't see, he relied on his other senses. "I would have missed it if I looked at him like an ordinary person. But my senses have been hypersensitive lately. I picked up something on him. Should we share this with the authorities?" Frank asked, checking his weapon. Matt shook his head. "That is impossible. If the target started a company, he's a public figure, and there are witnesses," Frank argued. "But those witnesses wouldn't be credible in court." Matt perceived the vibrations in the air and the heartbeat of the city. He tossed the magazine he had bought onto the table in front of Frank and took a beer from the refrigerator. "This is the comic he draws," Matt said. "You and I know about the incident. But the suspect is a celebrity now. You want to find him?" Frank asked, fingering the comic. Matt ran his fingers over the paper. The printing on the page had a slight texture, allowing him to use touch reading to analyze the ink quality. "It's a pity that right now, he only tells stories," Matt mused. "We need to figure out whose side he's really on." "Ah, you pervert." A scream that could rival a sonic weapon resounded throughout the building, shattering the morning calm. Early in the morning, Light Inksworth, who was still groggy from sleep and with a huge noticeable hard-on, was jolted awake by the deafening noise. His sleepy eyes were heavy, but the sound snapped them open instantly. Light's eyes widened in shock, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Boom! Without thinking, he used a Shenpo, flash step. He retreated backward 2 steps instantly and slammed the bathroom door shut. The renovations on the building were nice, but the layout had one flaw: the bathroom on the 2nd floor was shared. After Light calmed his racing heart, he coughed dryly through the door. "Lorna, that wasn't. I only saw a little, I swear." Inside, Lorna sat on the toilet, completely compromised. Her face was pale with shock. If one didn't know the context of her scream, they might think she was being murdered. However, shame and anger were written all over her face. Upon hearing Light's polite nonsense, she shouted angrily, "You pervert! This is a shared bathroom? Learn to knock on the door." Outside the door, Light felt a pang of guilt. The image of Lorna's legs flashed through his mind. He was still startled, and his breathing was ragged. He knew her face must be flushed crimson, her expression one of pure rage. And the color of her hair changed when her powers flared up, Light noted internally. "That image is burned into my brain now," Light muttered to himself, regretting his intrusion. "She's furious. I need to handle this carefully." Regarding Lorna's accusation, Light felt embarrassed. He stammered, "Lorna, listen. I was up late drawing last night. I rushed out 4 new chapters, and I was basically sleepwalking. There was that earthquake last night, and I didn't sleep well." He paused, then added, digging his own grave, "Actually, I really didn't see anything. You don't need to be so. I mean, I just saw you sitting on the toilet, and it's quite dark, and your face is really red, you know." "Just shut up, Light," Lorna screamed. Okay, I was just working on the comics. I'm exhausted." Light tried to explain, but it came out as gibberish. Light realized he couldn't talk his way out of this. He scratched his head, depressed, and moved quickly away from the door. Fine, my bad. I'm going downstairs to shit. Get lost. It didn't take long for Lorna's heartbeat to slow down. But then, her ears perked up. She heard footsteps coming back. Her heart started beating wildly again. She became angry and yelled frantically inside her mind. Is that pervert coming back? What does he want? Does he want to force the door open? Light, however, just walked past to go to the downstairs bathroom. Oh my god, how much did he see? Did he see me down there? Lorna thought, mortified. No matter how Lorna analyzed it, the fact remained, she hadn't locked the door because she forgot. Light had walked in by accident. But if he thinks that was on purpose, then he really is a pervert. Fortunately, Golly's voice came from outside the door. It's me, Lorna, Golly said. I didn't hear everything. Did he really see you? Golly said this with an excited, gossipy tone. Her ear was pressed against the door, and she secretly thought, humans make such loud breathing sounds when they panic. No, Lorna's voice came out, surprisingly calm. This made Golly pause, a little confused. Lorna looked up at the ceiling, muttering an oath to herself. She tried to pretend she was detached from the incident, while Golly floated back, shaking her head. Inside, Lorna used her abilities to punish Light in her imagination. She twitched her mouth. The angle of the door opening meant he had definitely seen everything. Gritting her teeth, she directed her power into the air. She pulled on the steel bars inside the walls, twisting the metal until it groaned under the stress. It's over, my life is over, she moaned. She didn't know why she hadn't attacked him immediately. She hadn't been thinking. She reacted like a normal, embarrassed girl. What is wrong with me? She just wanted to skin him alive now. This wasn't her usual cold character at all. Golly, as if reading her mind, asked quietly through the door, Lorna, do you like light? The question was like an arrow piercing through the silence. It stabbed Lorna's heart fiercely. Her hair began to float, defying gravity. Dark green energy surged, replacing the dyed black of her hair. She shouted furiously, Golly. At this moment downstairs, Golly got scared and zipped down to stand near Light, who was about to make breakfast. When Light looked back, he saw Golly's purple hair flash by as she ran for cover. Then, a furious Lorna, controlling the pots and pans of the kitchen like floating weapons, chased past him. A murderous aura trailed behind her. Oh god, Light shivered. Rand Enterprises helipad. A helicopter banked sharply, descending toward the top of the skyscraper. As the door opened, a figure stepped out, his chest suddenly emitting a soft golden light. The power was palpable even from this height. A young man with curly blonde hair walked onto the helipad. Danny, don't be impulsive, a woman's voice warned from inside the chopper. According to last night's news, Hell's Kitchen had a seismic event. The situation is volatile. New York, Danny Rand interrupted, taking a deep breath of the city air. Danny Rand, am finally back. Danny, the Asian woman, Colleen Wing, said seriously as she stepped out. Danny clenched his fist, causing it to glow brighter. I'm just waiting for them to make a move. I know, Colleen, Danny added, his tone softening but his confidence remaining unshaken. Danny was not emboldened by arrogance, but by purpose. Colleen walked up beside him. Let's find some allies first. The vigilantes in Hell's Kitchen are a good choice. It will be more effective to deal with the threats if we aren't alone. Now, New York is laid out before us. Colleen and Danny left the helipad. One went to investigate the streets, and the other entered the chairman's office on the top floor to reclaim his family's legacy. Lightingsworth carried 3 brown paper bags filled with breakfast takeout, walking leisurely through the streets of Hell's Kitchen. The closer he got to his residence, the fewer pedestrians there were on the sidewalks. He placed the bags down gently on a clean patch of concrete, looked around at the suspiciously empty street, and smiled. Come out. Don't hide. Whoosh! A black blade tomahawk was thrown from a blind corner, rotating rapidly with the sound of tearing wind. Light raised his hand like lightning. He caught the axe mid-spin, grabbing the handle at an extremely tricky angle with casual ease. Gangsters again. Light sneered, weighing the weapon in his hand. I'm getting tired of this. Since he traveled to the Marvel Universe, no supervillains had troubled him directly yet. Instead, it was an endless stream of low-level thugs. Several young white men in standard black suits rushed out from the alleyways, weapons in their hands, charging menacingly to surround him. But this time, the gangsters were different from Frank D'Amico's crew. There was no nonsense, no posturing. They had the fierce, disciplined look of professional contract killers. Since you are here to die, Light said, his face turning cold, then die. He leaned back slightly, swinging the captured axe as if winding up a pitch, and released it in an instant. Boom! The air suddenly exploded. A circular shockwave erupted from his hand, surging outward like a cannon blast. ZZZZT! The axe spun with extreme speed, cutting the air and making a sharp, high-pitched whistle. It turned into a blur, flying straight out like a cannonball, and instantly arrived in front of the gang. Splat! Blood gushed. A head flew up. The expression on the thug's face was still fierce, his brain hadn't even processed his own death before it happened. The axe arced around in midair like a boomerang and returned to Light's hand. He caught it, shaking the blood off the blade with a cold smile. Dead? Is that it? The remaining gangsters were stunned. Before they could react, a chill like ice water was poured over their heads. He's only one person. Let's go together. One of them, more courageous than the rest, steadied his emotions and rushed up. The others reacted and followed his lead. Bang! Light didn't use the axe this time. He kicked. The thug who shouted was hit directly in the stomach. He flew backward like a stone skipped across water, smashing into a brick wall. He was embedded deep into the masonry, blood flowing out from the pile of dust and broken rocks. Another one dead. Mutant? He is a monster. The remaining 3 thugs broke. They fled in panic, smart enough to run in 3 different directions to split his focus. Shadow clone jutsu. Light didn't perform any hand seals. He didn't need to anymore. Poof. 3 clones appeared and chased after the fleeing thugs. With speed that rivaled a speedster, the clones caught the men in seconds. The thugs thought they had a chance to escape, but under the severe pain of having their bones broken one by one, they realized the truth. The clones didn't hesitate. They silenced the 3 men on the spot. They were ordered to just cut off my hands. As the shadow clones poofed into white smoke and disappeared, the information and memories they transferred back to Light made him think. This group of thugs was from the Kingpin's empire. But the mission requirement was strange: chop off the target's hands. Did someone from the comics industry put a hit on me? Light mused. It had to be peer competition. This wasn't uncommon in the United States corporate world. Just as Obadiah Stane hired terrorists to kill Tony Stark, someone was hiring Kingpin to stop Light from drawing. Interests were moving. Marvel Entertainment was now the hegemon of the comics market. Light was pocketing 70% of the industry's profits, leaving other companies to drink soup. With his upcoming titles, he would likely embezzle 90% of the market share. The only way to solve this monopoly was to solve the source, the artist. Obviously, most comic companies were afraid of losing money, but they didn't dare to extend their foot into the underworld. But clearly, someone was desperate enough to try. Light looked at the remaining clone standing beside him. Go, Light said indifferently. Solve it completely. Sure. The clone nodded and vanished down the street. Fisk Tower, top floor. Mr. Fisk, this is a token of our appreciation. A sleek, well-dressed man named Andre slid a check across the glass table. Andre, rest assured. My people are already gone. The Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, smiled cheerfully at the man sitting on his sofa. Fisk took the check calmly, glancing at the number. The smile on his face blossomed like a flower. That's good, Andre said, adjusting his glasses. Alas, business is difficult now. What kind of garbage is this kid drawing? And yet it's so popular. We just need him, unable to work. The 2 men laughed and talked freely. Andre continued to satirize Light's comics, though both knew that if the comics were actually bad, they wouldn't be meeting here today to put a hit on the author. Yeah, it looks just right. A voice suddenly sounded from the shadows of the office. Andre and Fisk turned their heads. A cold, black shadow stepped out, revealing a young man. He is Lightingsworth. Andre's face changed drastically, and he exclaimed in terror. Why is he here? What? Andre shouted, terrified, scrambling back into the sofa. Mr. Fisk, what's the meaning of this? Why is no one stopping him? Fisk ignored Andre's question. He realized instantly that if Light was here, his elite guards outside were likely dead. Fisk didn't talk. He didn't call for backup. He rushed forward. His sturdy body, like a mountain of muscle, moved with terrifying speed for a man of his size. He swung his cane, which crackled with hidden mechanics: a laser, a gas sprayer, a high-voltage taser. But Light had no time for nonsense. The Light in the office was a shadow clone. He knew that a clone would disappear if it took significant damage, so he couldn't get hit. Light used Shunpo, Flash Step. He vanished from Fisk's sight, reappearing inside the giant man's guard. Light clenched his fist, aiming at the massive abdomen close at hand. Monstrous power, 20%. Boom! The air in the room exploded. Fisk's unstoppable body was instantly penetrated by the huge force. His entire abdomen recessed, the internal organs bursting wildly under the pressure. The terrifying force didn't stop at Fisk. It passed through him. Andre opened his mouth, watching this horrible scene, but he couldn't make a sound. The shockwave exiting Fisk's back hit Andre like a freight train. His body was blown backward, smashing through the reinforced floor-to-ceiling windows and blasting out into the open air of New York City. Fisk, the kingpin of crime, looked like a deflated balloon. He shuddered once and slumped directly to the ground, his chest heaving with shallow, ragged breaths. Light stood over the massive body. He didn't look at the shattered window where the client had just flown out. How is it possible? Fisk wheezed, consciousness blurring as blood pooled around him. Light didn't answer. He turned and walked to the door. Chaotic footsteps approached from outside. Bang! The door burst open. Bodyguards rushed in, weapons raised. But the scene in front of them made their pupils shrink suddenly. The kingpin was down, motionless on the floor. The window was shattered. And the room was empty. The loft, Chelsea. Light walked into the apartment, picking up the breakfast bags he had set down earlier. Golly was sitting at the table, waiting. Lorna was there too, looking nervous. Light, hurry up, Golly yelled, banging her fork on the table. I'm starving, and you need to let your clones come out. I know, Light said, setting the food down. Poof. White smoke rose. 5 clones appeared in the living room. Without a word, they walked into the studio and sat at the desks. Golly wasn't surprised. She pushed a comic script toward one of the clones. Lorna watched silently. She helped set the table while glancing at the studio. Having the clones draw allowed her to move a small bench and eat snacks happily while working. It improved her spirit and ability, and more importantly, her salary was increased. She knew that Golly didn't have much patience to draw. Of course, Lorna couldn't act like a baby to make Light summon clones for her. This was her job. She was actually afraid that Light would quit drawing himself because the clones were so much more efficient than her. She didn't want to lose her place here. Light, Lorna said softly. Is everything okay? You seemed tense when you left. She was still a little guilty about the misunderstanding in the bathroom earlier that morning, a topic neither of them had mentioned since. Everything is fine, Light said, taking a bite of a dumpling. Just dealt with some pests. If Light didn't mention it, Lorna wouldn't take the initiative to leave. Strangely speaking, after this morning, Light really lived a slightly plain life without any gang interruptions. 3 days later, the sudden collapse of Wilson Fisk's health sent shockwaves through the underworld, though the specific details remained murky to the public. His empire fell apart silently. Lieutenants fought for scraps, but they tried their best to conceal the boss's condition to prevent total anarchy. Some said he was dead, others said he was in a coma in a private Swiss facility. SHIELD was stunned throughout the entire process. Agent Carlson monitored the reports. The street probes and cameras near Fisk Tower had been damaged or wiped clean, likely Golly's doing again. Fisk has been neutralized, Carlson said, looking at the intelligence report. And a rival publishing executive named Andre was found on the pavement below the tower. It was impossible to ask the police to investigate. Gangsters didn't call 911 when their boss was attacked. In the SHIELD database, Carlson wanted to act. He suspected it was related to the previous events at the carnival and the Frank D'Amico massacre. But after a week without any disturbance from Lightingsworth, who was just going on dates with Gwen Stacy or staying home to draw S.H.I.E.L.D, hit a wall. Their intelligence capabilities were stretched thin dealing with Tony Stark's disappearance and the mutant issue. The internal power struggle of a gang was low priority. Peace returned to Light's life. And tonight was another night for the lottery. Light sat in his chair, watching the new issue of Shonen Jump sales figures climb on his screen. System, Light whispered. Let's see what we got. Standing on the balcony, Lightingsworth looked at the brightly lit New York night scene, feeling extremely happy. Calling out the system interface, he saw that his fan value had skyrocketed in just 1 week. He now had 7 comics running simultaneously: One Punch Man, Tokyo Ghoul, Attack on Titan, Naruto, Bleach, The Terminator, and Doraemon. The fan value provided by the first 3 comics had plateaued, as the base reader number wasn't increasing as rapidly anymore. However, the fan value provided by the 4 new comics was astonishing. Combined, the 7 books had generated more than 5.5 million points this week. The fan value label on the screen displayed the number, 5,583,625. This wasn't even the limit. Even if there were no new comics next week, the fan value would double again because the new month was approaching. At the beginning of each month, the fan value would be recalculated based on monthly readership, leading to a massive blowout of points credited to his account. Plus, a new comic will be released next week, Light thought, barely able to contain his excitement. System, adjust the lottery specifications. 1 draw at 1.5 million. 1 at 1 million. And then, Light calculated silently. 5.5 million is a huge amount. I have to plan carefully. He immediately excluded the low-tier lotteries. A minimum of 300,000 points per draw was necessary. In his first lottery, the system had stated that fragments are low-level awards, implying that high consumption of fan points would yield complete skills or items rather than fragments. But he also knew that blowing 5 million on a single draw wasn't necessarily efficient. It was a lottery, not a store with clear price tags. He remembered getting the useless Konoha Forward Protector in a previous million-point draw. The jackpot wasn't guaranteed, and he couldn't bet everything on one spin. He needed to spread the risk. Light was well aware of the unpredictable nature of this game. His eyes shone with determination as he said, "Scrap that. Readjust." The system panel cleared instantly, waiting for a new command. He spoke slowly, 1 draw at 2 million, 1 at 1.5 million, and 1 at 1 million. That totaled 4.5 million points. The remaining points, 1 draw at 700,000, and 1 at 300,000. That used up roughly 5.5 million, leaving him with a small buffer. System adjusted. Please start the lottery. The order is from low consumption to high consumption. Start. The pitch-black turntable spun rapidly, the pointer blurring until it finally slowed. First, the 300,000 point draw. Congratulations, host. Obtained, Naruto's worn-out jacket X1. Skill, Hyrankyaku, flying screen step / spirit particle paving. A beige jacket with the red Uzumaki spiral on the back appeared. It looked tattered. Light sighed and stuffed it into a plastic trash bag he now kept handy for useless items. But the second item made his eyes shine. Hyrankyaku, a high-speed movement technique from Bleach used by Quincy's. It gathers spirit particles, Reishi, under the user's feet to create a platform, allowing for high-speed movement and flight. Note, all worlds with living beings possess Reishi / spirit particles. Flight. Light raised his brows with joy. This was essentially airwalking. Even though the jacket was trash, this skill alone made the 300,000 points worth it. And it wasn't a fragment, it was a complete skill. Without needing a manual, a white light burst into his mind, and the knowledge integrated instantly. It felt like instinct. Light stepped gently onto the air. He felt the invisible particles in the atmosphere being pulled and gathered under his soul. He stepped onto the air half a meter off the ground as if it were solid concrete. He walked a few steps forward, ascending higher. The Reishi scrambled to form slabs beneath him. He dashed in the air, trying an S-turn, then a B-turn. No obstacles. After practicing for a while, he landed back on the balcony. The feeling of gravity was different now that he knew he could defy it. Continue. Next, the 700,000 point draw. Congratulations host. Obtained, Kakuhou Fragment X1, Ken Kaneki Fragment X3, Saitama Fragment X2, Transformation Technique, Henge no Jutsu, Crystal Ball. System prompt, synthesizable items detected. Synthesizing. 2 beams of light flew out of his warehouse previous fragments of ghoul organs. They collided with the new fragments from the turntable. A dazzling flash of light faded to reveal a pulsing, bean-sized organ. Kakuhou, complete the organ of a ghoul that stores RC cells and manifests the Kagun. Light shuddered. He didn't want to become a ghoul and crave human flesh. He stored it away. The transformation technique was self-explanatory. Light equipped it immediately. Poof. He transformed into Lorna. He looked down at his chest. He suddenly had a bold idea, but shook his head vigorously. No, focus. He released the transformation and dragged the crystal ball into his warehouse. Crystal ball, from Naruto. When used with the telescope technique, it allows long-range surveillance. Without the technique, it is just a ball. The third Hokage's peeping tool. Light scratched his head. Useful for intel, I guess. Continue to next tier, 1 million point draw. Yes. The turntable spun again. Congratulations host. Obtained, Scroll of Seals. Naruto Uzumaki Fragment X1, Saitama Fragment X2, Mikasa Ackerman Fragment X2, Animal Transformation Biscuit. Light sorted the fragments into the warehouse first. He looked at the Animal Transformation Biscuit from Doraemon. Animal Transformation Biscuit. After eating, the user will take on the physical characteristics and abilities of the animal depicted on the biscuit for 5 minutes. A prank item, Light muttered, storing it. He focused on the main prize. Scroll of Seals, the Forbidden Scroll from Naruto. Contains dangerous high-level jutsu. System note, with the Scroll of Seals, collected ninjutsu fragments can be directly converted into full skills. System prompt, multiple shadow clone fragments detected. Strengthening. Upgrade complete. Skill, multiple shadow clone jutsu, complete. The LV5 in the upper right corner of the shadow clone icon disappeared. The skill was now fully mastered, removing the limitations of the fragmented version. Wait, Light frowned. Does this mean I can learn other jutsu from it? He had hoped to learn techniques like Flying Thunder God or the 8 Inner Gates instantly. System prompt, no. The scroll is an item. Unless the host possesses chakra, the techniques cannot be learned manually. The scroll acts as a catalyst to complete fragmented skills obtained via lottery. Light's face darkened. He stuffed the scroll into the warehouse. Still, being able to complete future skills was a huge advantage. Continue. 1,500,000 point draw. Congratulations host. Obtained, Skynet Fragment X1, Ichigo Kurosaka Fragment X3, Hollow, Standard, X1, Naruto Uzumaki Fragment X3, Restoration Flashlight, Azura Kabuto Skill, Toughness Fragment X2. Synthesizable items detected. Synthesizing. The 3 Skynet fragments he now possessed collided, emitting a dark, ominous light. They fused into a black USB drive. Skynet, core code a super artificial intelligence. Self-aware. The internet is its nervous system. Light's expression changed. He held the drive. It looked ordinary, but it contained a world-ending entity. I am not plugging this into a computer yet, Light whispered, placing it carefully on the table. He looked at the flashlight. Restoration Flashlight, from Doraemon. Objects illuminated by its light will return to their previous state. Damaged items become new. Processed items return to raw materials. Industrial products. Light thought. This is incredibly useful. I could repair Tony Stark's suit instantly. Or, disassemble things. If I shine this on Wolverine, will his adamantium skeleton turn back into raw ore? The toughness fragments overlapped with his existing skill, upgrading it to level 4. His physical defense soared. Finally, a ball of light remained. Hollow, Standard a minor spirit monster from Bleach. Invisible to normal humans. Strong but mindless. Can be summoned as a minion. Cannon fodder, Light noted. Final draw, 2 million points. Light felt nervous. This was the big one. Congratulations host. Obtained, Naruto Uzumaki Fragment X2, Ichigo Kurosaka Fragment X3, Kakuhou Fragment X2, Genos Incineration Cannon Thrusters, Doraemon Fragment X4, Animal Biscuit, Bear, Vaccine Man Skill, Regeneration, complete. Light smiled with joy. Except for the character fragments, these are all high-tier items. The Genos Thrusters were sci-fi perfection. They looked like small cone-shaped missiles that could attach to a mechanical body or be used as handheld weapons, capable of emitting devastating blasts. The Regeneration skill leveled up again. The green cross icon turned into a lush leaf pattern. Regeneration, complete high-speed cellular regeneration derived from Vaccine Man, One Punch Man. Can heal from almost any non-fatal injury instantly. Light sorted his inventory. He was about to pick up the Skynet USB drive again when... Rumble? A violent shaking sensation hit the building. The floor trembled beneath his feet. Light immediately pocketed the USB drive and used Hiron Kyako to step onto the air, flying out off the balcony. Looking around, the lights of Manhattan were flickering and dying. Within moments, the city plunged into darkness. Earthquake. There had been a small tremor a few days ago, but this was a large-scale event. Bang! A pillar of golden light soared into the gloomy night sky from a few blocks away. The bright light exploded in the clouds, and Light could feel the energy fluctuations clearly from this distance. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sharp sound of breaking wind echoed nearby. Light looked down. A man in a black t-shirt, covered in blood, was running desperately down the street. Chasing him were several ninjas dressed in red gi. The hand. Light stroked his forehead and sighed helplessly as he watched the man running in his direction. It's trouble again. I'm just trying to live a normal cartoonist life here, Light muttered sarcastically. Why does trouble always come to my doorstep? This was the Marvel Universe. Daily disasters were just part of the weather forecast. The Punisher ran through the dark alleys of Hell's Kitchen, his breath ragged. He knew the terrain like the back of his hand, but retreat wasn't an option. These ninjas were like sticky plaster, he couldn't shake them off. He had gone to Queens earlier to find Spider-Man, hoping the webslinger could help stop the Hand's conspiracy, but the kid was nowhere to be found. He had to find help. The earthquake earlier had shaken the city to its core. A golden light had exploded into the night sky, spilling bright energy particles over the city. The Punisher's mood was grim. He wanted to cross the Brooklyn Bridge, but he knew it was too late. The light was the signal. The Hand was preparing to strike at the foundation of the city. Just as he was about to turn around and make a last stand, he glanced up at a balcony. That's the cartoonist, Frank muttered. The one who killed Bullseye. He changed direction instantly. The loft. Lightingsworth, wearing his pajamas, stood on the balcony watching the chaos unfold in the distance. Suddenly, the Punisher rushed toward him from the fire escape, and the ninjas pursuing him followed closely behind. To a stranger, it would look like a desperate man running to ask for help from a civilian, but the group of deadly assassins behind him told a different story. Light, Frank shouted, we need your help. I refuse, Light said instantly. And how do you know who I am? Who would agree to help a stranger with a death squad on his tail? You killed Bullseye. I found the clues myself, Frank said rapidly, ignoring the ninjas closing in behind him. I knew you would refuse, so I'll tell you this, the Hand is digging up the ruins of ancient Kunlun under Manhattan. As soon as the voice fell, Light couldn't help but chuckle. Kunlun. Light chuckled. This is New York. How could Kunlun ruins be here? Dragon bones, Frank said. There is a dragon skeleton buried deep beneath the foundation. The Hand plans to blow it up to harvest the essence. The explosion will shatter the bedrock. The city will sink. Light frowned. Sink. Manhattan will collapse. Millions will die. You're joking, Light said, but he saw the seriousness in Frank's eyes. There are plenty of superheroes. And you have that groupie thing with Daredevil. The Defenders, was it? No offense, but it's a tacky name. It's true, Frank growled. The chaos last night and the earthquake were all done by them. He turned around. The ninjas were 2 steps away. The situation was critical. Light didn't say a word. He raised his hand. Energy ball, level 3. Boom! A sphere of white light slammed into the ninja squad like a high-explosive bomb. The speed was beyond human reaction. In an instant, the ninjas were blown into residue. Frank didn't expect it at all. He blinked, staring at the empty space where the enemies had been. Light looked back at the bedroom door. Golly and Lorna were standing there. After the earthquake, the two had run out of their rooms, circling around the living room in confusion. I'm going out for a bit, Light said. I'll go too, Lorna said without thinking. I can help you. Light stared at her deeply. He didn't expect her to volunteer. Lorna felt his gaze and blushed slightly. She looked away, raising her pinky finger. Just a little help. Light shook his head secretly. He looked at the metal mop bucket in the corner. Lorna rolled her eyes. She controlled the iron bucket, filling it with water to wash the blood off the balcony eaves, then floated the mop over to clean up. If Magneto saw his daughter using her powers for housekeeping, he would probably have a myocardial infarction. Let's go, Light said to Frank. On the way, Frank hesitated. You. He was about to ask why Light changed his mind, but was interrupted. I'm not a vigilante, nor a hero, and at the same time I am not interested in dealing with Kunlun politics, Light interrupted with an ugly expression. I just want to make sure New Yorkers are alive tomorrow to buy my comics. If the foundation was destroyed and Manhattan sank, the delivery trucks would fall into the abyss before reaching the bookstores. Who is in the mood to read comics in a ruin? If his fan base died, his fan value would drop. If the comics weren't released tomorrow, he would lose a bunch of points income. 10,000 points less? No, how much would he lose by then? Millions? Who would pay for that loss? Since the Hand wanted to cut his revenue stream, he would cut them down. Midtown Manhattan, underground excavation site. Deep beneath a skyscraper, a massive excavation site revealed ancient stone structures. An elevator in the center clicked open. The 5 leaders of the Hand walked out. Simultaneously, ropes dropped from the ceiling, and a countless army of ninjas slid down. The Defenders Daredevil, Matt Murdock, Iron Fist, Danny Rand, Luke Cage, and Jessica Jones stood ready to confront them. The first to walk out was Alexandra, a tall European woman. She was followed by Madame Gao, Murakami, Sawande, and Bakuto. The 5 fingers of the Hand. They had defected from Kunlun centuries ago, using the life energy of dragon bones to achieve immortality. But their supply was running dry. They had found another skeleton under Manhattan, sealed by the iron fists of old. In the past few days, the Hand used all methods to open the seal but failed. Today, they decided to use high-energy explosives to directly blast through the foundation and break the seal with brute force. Daredevil and the others came to stop them in time, forming a team called the Defenders to protect the safety of Manhattan. There were not many members of the Defenders. There were no official leader amongst them. Danny Rand, who had just returned to New York and was now the sworn enemy of the Hand. He had been dubbed Iron Fist, and his girlfriend Colleen Wing stood right next to him with her katana drawn. Daredevil, who was active in Hell's Kitchen, found two helpers, the enhanced private detective Jessica Jones and an enhanced former soldier, Luke Cage, both of whom were powerful superpowered individuals. There was also the Punisher, who had gone out to rescue soldiers. They didn't expect that there would be so many ninjas hiding in this building. With so many foreign armed forces infiltrating the city, what were the relevant departments doing? Daredevil complained secretly about the certain organization that was supposed to help with this kinds of things. SHIELD had been monitoring them very vigorously on weekdays, and now that they're needed, they aren't even showing up? Danny, it seems that you are a new generation of Iron Fist. It just happens that the seal needs an Iron Fist to open. Alexandra took a few steps forward, looking at them with cold, predatory eyes, and finally addressed Danny. Stop talking nonsense. Danny Rand shouted, his fist glowing. You traitors. He rushed forward, his first glowing orange like a beacon of golden light. Danny's actions were like a fuse. Daredevil and the others followed closely, and the ninja army pressured them instantly. For a time, swords and shadows clashed, hidden weapons burst out, and a chaotic melee ensued. Luke Cage and Jessica Jones used their super strength to plow through the ninjas. Danny smashed them with his iron fist. Daredevil fought with superb skill using his billy clubs. But the Hand had numbers. They threw wave after wave of cannon fodder at the heroes to drain their stamina. As long as there was a trace of fatigue, the wolves would tear them apart. In just a moment, without even touching the 5 fingers, the Defenders began to exhaust their strength. Outside the building, the dark night obscured the tactical team positioned on the rooftops. Natasha, what's the situation? A voice came through Black Widow's earpiece. I am ready to act anytime. Coulson, start preparing, Natasha Romanoff whispered. She was wearing a black tactical suit, her red hair blending into the shadows. As the largest official supernatural response agency, SHIELD began in-depth investigations as early as the first small earthquake. The incidents that Agent Coulson investigated were all focused on Manhattan. The source of the earthquake was enough to attract S.H.I.E.L.D's full attention. They planned to wait for the opportune moment strike when the Defenders were about to lose, securing the assets and the threat simultaneously. Oh, shit, Coulson's voice broke the silence. Hold fire. An unknown flying object is approaching. What is it? Natasha asked, signaling her team to hold. Look up. Natasha looked at the night sky. Buzz. The sound of air being displaced echoed above. A figure passed over her head, less than 20 meters away. Hawkeye, perched on a nearby water tower with his bow, spoke into the comms. White kimono, short brown hair, black-rimmed glasses. He can fly, Natasha noted, her eyes narrowing. And I don't see any thrusters. Who is he? Mutant? Or an enhanced? Coulson asked. Rumble. Just as the 5 fingers of the Hand felt victory was within their grasp, the ground suddenly began to shake violently. Dust and pebbles rained down from the cavern ceiling, and a dull roar echoed throughout the underground space. The ninja army besieging the Defenders froze. Everyone looked up. They were deep underground. If the ceiling collapsed, no one would escape alive. Boom! The concrete slab at the bottom of the elevator shaft collapsed directly. Massive chunks of debris fell rapidly. The 5 fingers leaped away just in time, but several ninjas who failed to react were instantly smashed into bloody paste. The Defenders secretly cursed that the villains weren't crushed, but they were grateful the entire cavern hadn't come down on their heads. At that moment, a figure appeared at the entrance of the collapsed shaft, floating gently downward and landing slowly on a pile of rubble. Who are you? Alexandra asked quietly, her eyes narrowing. Aizen Sosuke. His voice was very flat, casual. It felt like he was just making small talk, appearing extremely calm and completely ignoring the surrounding ninja army as if they were nothing. Alexandra noticed that his brown eyes behind the rectangular glasses held no fluctuation of emotion. It was as if he were looking at insects. Lightingsworth stared at the ninjas around him, then at Daredevil and the others he had met once before, his expression unmoved. His current appearance was calculated to hide his true identity. His current appearance was a disguise. He had used the transformation technique to change his hair, clothes, and facial features, though his genetic structure remained human. He looked exactly like the villain from Bleach. He had taken all factors into consideration before setting out. He couldn't just walk out swaggeringly as himself. Trouble would come to his door if he did. Currently, his comics needed to be released on the market, and he couldn't afford to appear in front of SHIELD as a vigilante. He couldn't afford SHIELD knocking on his door every day. He needed a persona. In order not to reveal his true identity, Light used the transformation technique to become someone who, in this world's history, had never existed before. Since Bleach had only released one chapter so far, Aizen Sosuke wouldn't appear in the manga for another 2 months. By the time SHIELD realized the connection, it would be too late. Speak of the devil, and they shall appear. Light sensed movement above. A group of people was rappelling down behind a woman with wavy red hair. SHIELD had already arrived on the scene. Daredevil, however, felt a spark of recognition. His super senses told him through heartbeat and scent that the name Aizen Sosuke was a pseudonym, and the man's appearance had changed. In fact, he was the cartoonist he met earlier. But Matt didn't say anything. Light was obviously here to help them. It seemed the Punisher had successfully brought in the heavy artillery. Japanese? Alexandra asked, analyzing his name. Her eyes condensed. This vigilant stranger who came from the unknown revealed extraordinary gestures just now. They had all used the elevator or ropes to get down because the height was significant, yet he floated. Light ignored her. He walked slowly toward the 5 fingers. The hand ninjas moved like ghosts in the dark, their footsteps silent as they formed a red tide encircling him. They held katanas, kusarigama, and shuriken, aiming their sharp killing intent at Light's vital points. They immediately identified him as the primary threat, leaving only a skeleton crew to watch Daredevil and his party. It doesn't matter whether the dust removed is 1 speck or 2, Light said calmly, looking at the army with mild interest. To the naked eye, it makes no difference. As soon as the voice fell, he moved. Shunpo. He vanished. In the next instant, he was standing directly in front of a ninja. The man's face twisted in shock, he hadn't even seen him move. Light snatched the katana from the ninja's hand. A flash of cold light followed. The ninja lost consciousness and collapsed, cut down before he could blink. Then, the cold light began to dance among the wolves. Slash! Light moved through the army like a silver phantom. Each swing of the blade created a vacuum of air pressure, the force smashing bodies as if they were made of paper. Screams filled the cavern. Limbs flew. Blood sprayed like crimson fountains. It was a slaughter. In less than a minute, a third of the ninja army, hundreds of trained killers lay dead. Tattered corpses were scattered everywhere, and the pungent smell of iron filled the air. Blood gathered on the floor, forming a stream that flowed toward the excavation pit. A life not commensurate with strength is just a waste, Light said, flicking the blood off his stolen katana. The 5 fingers stared with dignified horror at the carnage. Madame Gao's eyes turned cold. Useless trash. I will do it myself. Although it wasn't clear what Light's upper limit was, in their opinion, he was just fast and skilled with a sword. But they were the 5 fingers. They possessed the secret chi techniques of Kunlun, honed over centuries. They were masters of all martial arts, east and west. The remaining ninjas bowed their heads in shame and split apart to create a path for her. Madame Gao moved swiftly for an old woman. She filled her body with chi and rushed out like an arrow from a bow. Her palm glowed with a faint white light as she aimed a lethal strike at Light's chest. Snap! A crisp, resounding slap echoed underground. Madame Gao felt a severe pain in her face. The world spun. She flew backward like a whipped top, crashing through several of her own ninjas before skidding to a halt. Blarg! Madame Gao spat out several teeth and a mouthful of blood. A bright red handprint was branded onto her face. The pupils of the other 4 leaders shrank to pinpoints. They looked at Light with growing dread. Only then did they realize, the man in front of them didn't have a single drop of blood on his white kimono, despite slaughtering 100 men. Let's go together, Alexandra said in a low voice. He is only one person. Murakami, Saonde, and Bakuto nodded. Madame Gao shakily got to her feet, realizing her chi was useless against raw speed. The 5 of them surrounded Light, keeping a cautious distance, looking for flaws. Why keep your distance? Light asked, adjusting his glasses. If you want to hit me, you should approach me. Or are you afraid that if you get too close, I might disappear from your sight? The 5 fingers sneered, preparing their weapons. If that is the case, Light continued, it is just an unnecessary annoyance. Fighting distance only has meaning when the opponents are equal in strength. Therefore, the distance between you and me carries no meaning at all. As soon as the voice fell, Light appeared in front of all 5 of them simultaneously. After image clone, 5 light inksworths swung their blades at the same time. Slash! The powerful force split the air. The 5 fingers' eyes went wide. They wanted to make a sound, but their throats wouldn't work. A thin red line appeared on each of their bodies. Thud, thud, thud. One after another, the leaders of the hand fell to the ground, cut down in a single stroke. Light had never considered them a threat. They weren't even worth using a real super move on. The remaining ninja army fell into a stunned silence. Then, a collective roar erupted. They were dead men walking. Without the fingers, they had no purpose. Revenge filled their minds. They charged. At that moment, the SHIELD tactical team finished rappelling down. Don't move. Black Widow shouted, aiming her pistols. But no one listened. The ninjas ignored the agents and rushed toward Light like a tsunami. Fire. Bang, bang, bang. SHIELD agents opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark cavern. Bullets tore through the red-clad assassins, but the ninjas kept crawling toward Light even as they were shot. Within moments, the entire army was dead. Not a single ninja surrendered. Hawkeye frowned, lowering his bow. That man, he didn't dodge. The agents' guns didn't have eyes. Light was in the middle of the crossfire. Even if they didn't aim at him, stray bullets had definitely hit him. But Light still stood there calmly, looking at the SHIELD agents with a faint smile. He raised his hand and opened his palm. Clatter. With the sound of metal on stone, a handful of flattened bullets fell from his hand to the floor. The sound shocked everyone in SHIELD. He had caught them, or had they simply bounced off his skin? Since you want to join the party, Light said, his brown eyes gleaming behind his glasses, then let's have some fun. He waved his hand. Roar. A loud, bestial roar echoed in everyone's ears. No creature appeared, but everyone clearly felt a massive, invisible presence manifest in the cavern. Summoning, hollow, roar. The beast's roar caused smoke and dust to fly, and everyone's expressions turned to panic. There was nothing visible, yet they could clearly feel the abnormality in the air. Stop! We are not the enemy. Natasha Romanoff hurriedly yelled. She didn't expect the situation to escalate like this. Director Fury had said that this unknown entity shouldn't be treated as an enemy for the time being, but the situation had changed so quickly that it caught her off guard. When your gun is pointed at me, you already are. Light looked at Natasha, pushing his black-framed glasses up his nose. He spoke indifferently. You aren't going to tell me that was actually friendly fire, or a simple misfire, are you? Perhaps it was intended to be, but it certainly isn't now. He raised his hand. Come forth, my pet. Roar. In Light's eyes, a huge and burly monster stood by his side. It had a hollow cavity in its chest and a light gray body with a white, bone-like mask on its face. There was another roar. Except for Daredevil, everyone was confused. Daredevil, with his super senses, could feel an unknown monster standing next to Light through the small changes in air pressure and the vibrations of the ground. But to everyone else, it was invisible. Was it a cloaked monster? What surprised Daredevil most was that there was no heartbeat. It was incredible. Daredevil did not make a sound to warn them. The appearance of SHIELD now showed that they intended to reap the benefits of the battle like a fisherman waiting for the snipe and clam to fight. The most annoying thing for a vigilante like him was S.H.I.E.L.D's interference. Then he reconsidered. Since this was Lightningsworth, how could he have such strength? The cartoonist was not doing his job properly. He was fighting SHIELD instead of drawing. Natasha, the chief said that support has been sent. What we need to do is hold him here, Hawkeye whispered into his comms. Hawkeye squinted his eyes and used high-tech equipment to scan various spectrums, but there was no result. Not invisible, he thought. Modern science and technology could detect invisibility and camouflage through X-rays, thermal imaging, and motion sensors, but the scans showed nothing. This indicated that such creatures either did not exist on the physical spectrum, or they were shielded by something beyond science. Either way, the equipment was useless. Yet, Natasha had no choice but to respond. The SHIELD agents separated and surrounded Light, just like they had done with the ninjas earlier. However, they did not act rashly. The bullet storm earlier had been caught bare-handed. They could only rely on heavy weapons to fight against him. The hollow began to move. A sickening click sound made people's hearts throb. The keen-eyed Hawkeye saw the ground slightly collapse under an invisible weight and hurriedly shouted, "Attack the sinking position." He turned around and said to an agent behind him, "Always pay attention to the source of the sound waves and transmit the data to the communicator." Roar. The hollow's speed got faster and faster. Its heavy body rushed toward the surface agents, raising a massive fist. Bang! 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 Bullets vented toward the void, but they penetrated directly in the next second, without the blood splashing they had imagined. Natasha gritted her teeth and fired her pistols, but the result was the same. Did they simply miss? Or did the bullets pass through without injury? Buzz? Ah! Invisible claws swept the agents away. They screamed in pain as they were slammed into the cavern walls by an unseen force. Die! An agent rushed to the front, setting up a rocket launcher. Boom! The shell flew out. It was a Stark Industries product, extremely powerful. The rocket passed through the hollow's spiritual body and hit the wall behind it. The crashing rubble collapsed, and the stone wall smashed into cobweb-like cracks, spreading in all directions. Impossible? I should have hit it. The agent shouted with a dull face. In the next second, he was swatted away like a fly. Until now, he couldn't understand how he could miss when the target was close at hand. Hawkeye's face was pale. Did such a big body really dodge? At this time, the underground ceiling kept shaking off rubble. The surrounding walls were already covered with cracks, and countless grains of sand fell. No, the shell hit the support pillar just now. Retreat. Natasha shouted to the team. Carlson, pull us up. SHIELD was a powerful emergency response agency. They had contingency measures. Quickly, a small rescue pod was lowered from the surface, and the agents hurriedly fled into it. The faces of Daredevil and the defenders were tense. The collapse would undoubtedly bury everyone underneath. Just as Matt was hesitating whether to try and find a way out, the Punisher waved at them from the pod. When they saw this, they had no choice but to run over and scramble inside. Light unsummoned the hollow, stuffing it back into the warehouse. Anyway, it was just a mindless spirit, it wouldn't complain. He looked up at the rescue pod that was about to fly out of the ground. He stepped gently on the air. Hiran Kyaku. White air waves surged from his kick point, spreading out like ripples in water. Light's whole body burst out like a cannonball. In an instant, he overtook the rescue pod and flew out of the ground. Shunpo flashed again and again, and he cleared the building within a few strokes. Natasha and the other agents finally let out a breath as they watched Light's back retreating. A man who knew how to fly could easily attack the pod in the air, leaving them all dead without a place to be buried. Rumble, the building began to sink into the earth. As soon as the rescue pod cleared the collapse, a dazzling fireball appeared on the horizon. Hey, did you do this? I'll need you to get down, fella. I can't control this power yet, I'm warning you. Light stepped onto the sky. At this time, the clouds became more and more gloomy, as if pressing down on the city. At that moment, a dazzling flame flew violently from the distance. The burning flame took the shape of a young man. Human Torch. Light raised his eyebrows. There was no one else with this appearance. It seems that the Fantastic Four have already appeared, he thought. That's right. The 5 of them went to space in the last news cycle. Dude, what's with the flashy shoes? Is that what's allowing you to walk on air? Did you create it? How about you turn off the flashiness for SEC and face me? Johnny Storm, covered in flames, was triumphant. Soon after getting his abilities, SHIELD had begged for help, and he flew out impulsively. He wanted to end the wrangling with SHIELD for the other 3. Johnny even thought about how the New York Times would report tomorrow. It should be titled, How Human Torch Saved Manhattan. He would be praised by people all over the world. Light looked at Johnny's eagerness and said calmly, Johnny Storm, the most idiotic of the 2 siblings? Can you shut the fuck up? You practicing saying all of those quips in a mirror or something? Johnny looked down, who felt humiliated by the comment, shouted in anger, fuck. How did you know? Immediately, he waved his hand. A pillar of flames burst out of his body, swallowing Light under the raging fire. The extremely high-temperature pillar of fire swept across the air. The billowing heat waves burned the clouds, turning them dark red. It looked like a sea of fire in the sky. Fiery and violent energy exploded quickly, and sparks began to fall to the ground like meteors. The SHIELD agents on the ground were stunned. Aside from Magneto's assassination attempt on the president, even the Green Goblin had only used technology. Now, a superpower display that could destroy the world refreshed their worldview. Even Daredevil and the others were shocked. They took this opportunity to escape quickly, otherwise, it would not be easy to get out of the blast zone. You alive? Sure hope I didn't cook you. I don't cook that way. The frivolous Johnny approached slowly with rebellious triumph. Thousands of degrees of high-temperature flames boiled the air. The thin atmosphere was scarce, evaporated and changed. Even the clouds had been burned through, leaving a large hole. It was jaw-dropping. Hey, is he dead? Johnny explored the falling sea of flames. The average soldier rich in combat experience would never be so reckless. But Johnny was not a soldier. He just wanted to see if his opponent was burnt to charcoal. At this moment, a hand drilled out of the glorious sea of fire. It grabbed Johnny by the neck like lightning. The high temperature climbed onto the arm. However, it seemed that the burning of thousands of degrees only made the arm turn light red. It did not seem to cause any harm. You shouldn't have let your guard down. Light, in the guise of Aizen Sosuke, had an eerie smile on his face. The toughness of level 4 brought strong defense, and combined with regeneration, complete, this temperature could only make him feel heat, not burn him. Light clung to Johnny's neck tightly. He stepped on the air and turned around suddenly, as if throwing a ball. Bang! A ring of air exploded at the place where he released his hand. Whoosh! The violent air wave quickly turned into a hurricane and attacked in all directions, immediately extinguishing the raging flames. Johnny was thrown away from the clouds in an instant like a cannonball. He fell down rapidly. The flames on his body were blown out by the powerful airflow, flickering intermittently until they extinguished completely. Quickly, move! Natasha shouted, her face pale. A meteor in the sky pointed directly at where they were. No, it should be said that it was aiming at the ruined building foundation. No, flame on, flame on. Johnny, awake from his recklessness, was horrified. He knew that if he didn't turn into a flame man and fly again, he would fall to the ground as flesh and blood. Undoubtedly, a pool of blood was waiting for him. Johnny, who had just obtained superpowers, didn't know how deep the water in this world was. He was so unhappy that he felt he would become the master of the flame with a wave of his hand. Ben was just a stone man. His sister Susan could only open barriers. Reed was like noodles. None were as strong as him. He felt like the strongest in the world. But he didn't expect to be slapped down in a few days. Under the desire to survive, layers of burning flames began to erupt. The air became distorted, and he finally turned back into a flame man just before impact. However, the force that pushed him still made Johnny crash into the ruins like a meteor falling to the ground. A wave of horror spread out. The ruins burned. Johnny lay on his stomach in the center of the crater, flames spewing out of his mouth like liquid. However, this was not over yet. Light raised his hand. Several stars lit up in the sky, piercing the night. Energy ball, level 3. Sir, this is a high explosive reaction. A SHIELD agent holding an instrument yelled in horror. Stop. A blue light curtain instantly appeared over Johnny's head. The white energy ball slammed onto the barrier. Boom! A vast expanse of whiteness resounded across the world. Then, a pillar of fire that covered the entire ruin rose into the sky. The billowing black smoke dazzled from the fire. The surrounding rubble was all destroyed and disintegrated. The shockwave of dust and soil burst out with the sand. The lifeboat stretched out a barrier of its own, engaging its claws into the ground to anchor itself against the blast. Pay close attention. Hawkeye called out hysterically, but his voice was overwhelmed by the wind. The loud noise was like a mountain collapsing and the ground cracking. It was deafening. Light pushed his glasses up with his fingers. He looked down at the entire ruin covered by black smoke, which had been wiped out into a huge crater. Under the reflection of the lens, Light squinted his eyes. Look at that explosion. Megami would be proud. The full version of the energy ball could destroy a city with 3 shots. Even if it was only level 3, it still had a tenth of that power. The Fantastic Four blocked it. Johnny's body was being shielded by a rubber mesh Reed Richards. Susan Storm was sweating profusely, a blood stain on the corner of her mouth from the strain of her force field. Ben, how is it? Are you okay? Reed panted, caring more for his friend. The thing, made of crimson rocks, crossed his massive hands in front of him. His entire front body was burnt black. He coughed dumbly. Fortunately, it just hurts. After speaking, he fell heavily. Ben. Reed and Susan hurriedly rushed up and shouted. Johnny, who couldn't make any sparks, got up at this time. He had just returned from the edge of death's door. Regretting and guilty, he cried with tears on his face. It's all my fault. It's all me. It's all because of me. He's passed out in a coma. Reed checked Ben's vitals and finally let go of his heart a little. Not far away, there were bursts of buzzing sounds from high in the sky. Several fighter planes flew at extreme speeds, and there was a huge shadow in the clouds further away, the helicarrier. Because of your arrogance, you didn't hear what I said. The sound from the dark sky was quiet, but extremely clear. Everyone looked up. Maria Hill and Director Fury on the helicarrier looked at Light in the ultra-clear picture on the big screen. Light stepped into the dark clouds. He looked down condescendingly, and then he crushed his glasses. He raised his hand and sleeked his hair back. From the beginning, no one has stood in the sky. No enhanced, no mutants, not even the gods. But that unbearable vacancy of heaven's throne ends now. From now on, I will stand atop the heavens. Midtown High School. Peter Parker walked alone out of the school gates. Harry Osborn, who used to always be with him, had dropped out to manage Oscorp. Mary Jane Watson, his goddess, was now constantly by Harry's side. He hadn't told anyone that the Green Goblin was Uncle Norman. To outsiders, Norman Osborn was just missing like Tony Stark, leaving a glimmer of hope for Harry. But Peter still didn't know who had rescued him that night on the bridge, or if Uncle Norman had really been erased from existence. All of that was pushed to the back of his mind by the current Peter. Because today was a new day for Marvel Comics. The Flash game Bleach vs. Naruto, which was launched on the new official website a few days ago, was incredibly addictive. Although it was just a small browser game, several new characters had been added: Naruto's Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Kakashi Hatake. From Bleach, there was Yasudara Sato, Chad, Oriaminu, and Urayu Ishida. According to the official announcement, these characters would all appear in the next issue. Light Inksworth promised that each game update would be one step ahead of the comic release. This made the fans excited. They poured into the official website to play. The graphics were retro pixel art, but with the diverse ninjutsu and spiritual power skills, it was simply pure fun. There were even big brain theorists on the forums trying to guess the next plot direction through the skills released by the characters. But they were all wrong. Skills like Chidori, Great Fireball Technique, Getsuga Tensho, and Santen Kesshan were too diverse to predict a linear plot. Light had deliberately set up a forum on the official website. A large number of fans rushed in, feeling like they had finally found an organization. The web traffic spiked vertically. The sidewalk outside the comic store was already crowded with people. Peter slowly joined the queue, but then he saw a familiar figure in front of him. Dave. The boy turned his head. The two laughed when they saw each other. Peter, are you here to line up too? Of course. Dave Lizuski was a curly-haired boy who got bullied by others because of his weak character, just like Peter before the spider bite. It's my turn. Dave quickly bought 2 magazines. He took the lead in opening Shonen Jump. New characters appeared on the cover. A boy with black, spiky hedgehog hair, red tips, and golden bangs. He looked like a primary school student and had a golden puzzle box hanging around his neck. Sure enough, there are new comics appearing in every issue. Dave read it with a smile and stood aside to wait. When Peter bought his copy, the two walked side by side for a while, reading with gusto. When they were about to separate, they turned to a page advertising the new comic. What made them curious was that there was a physical card attached to this page, wrapped in plastic film. Huh? Peter, I have a card here. It's weird. I have it too, Peter said, peeling it off. But mine says Kuroba, and the pattern looks cute. Mine says Shining Friendship. Dave scratched his head in surprise. The pattern is completely different from yours. Is it related to the new comic? The two friends stopped at the corner of the wall and looked down at the cards. Peter seemed to have forgotten his Spider-Man identity at this moment. He was completely focused on the game mechanics. He also didn't notice a small blob of black liquid on the eaves above him, which quietly slipped into his open backpack. The Critic. Edward Vance bought the comics as usual. He turned on his computer, clicked on Twitter and the official website forum. One of the top posts caught his eye. It was pinned by the administrator. Monster Card Duel, a game linked with the new comic Yu-Gi-Oh! New comic? Card Duel. Edward was a little confused about how a card game and a comic could be linked effectively. He opened the magazine quickly. He did not rush to the new comic first. As a professional critic, he couldn't be swayed by promotional gimmicks. He maintained his usual analytical state. First, One Punch Man. Speedo Sound Sonic's latest appearance. The exquisite art style vividly expressed his swift and violent speed. Then, he came across Saitama, who was just looking for his lost hammer and didn't want to work. Seeing this, Edward's interest peaked. This Sonic looked weak but had amazing speed. Would Saitama fail to fight him? A little expectation rose in his chest. Sure enough, the two started to fight. Sonic's expression suddenly changed to a devil-like innocent smile, a little scary. But Saitama said, "I can tell you're a good guy by that innocent smile." Edward touched the non-existent cold sweat on his forehead and spat out mentally, "What kind of innocence is this?" Next, Sonic officially launched an attack, turning into white light moving at high speed among the trees, leaving no shadow, constantly jumping closer. Saitama's attitude also began to change. Even though the drawing style was still simple, he seemed to be reacting, a bit slowly. Edward took a brief sip of his coffee. His mind raced, not wanting to miss any details. Just as Sonic was about to launch a fatal attack from behind, Saitama looked back abruptly. Sonic, unable to stop his momentum, realized he was about to crash into Saitama's fist. In a panic, he tried to jump over him. But in the next second, Edward's eyes glared wide, and his legs instinctively closed together. A strange feeling of phantom pain washed over him. Sonic's crotch had landed directly on Saitama's fist. Edward couldn't bear to look straight at the panel. Sonic. Sonic. I can't provoke you, but I can't provoke him either. Edward turned the page. The coffee he was holding suddenly shook, and brown liquid spilled out. He trembled and finally put the cup on the table. His eyes rested on the next plot point, and he spoke in a deep voice. Heroes Association. It's breaking the mold again. No, this time it's reshaping the definition of the world of superheroes. Light Inksworth, what are you expressing? Before, I only focused on Saitama. But now, he defines the group. The registry, the bureaucracy of heroism. It's really a terrible thought. Edward gasped in horror at the realism of it. The Triskelion, SHIELD headquarters. The clue that the entire Hand Army had been wiped out lay on Director Fury's desk. Agent Coulson hadn't stopped moving from last night to this morning. There were too many incidents. Why did the Hand cause an earthquake? And who was this person? Director, this is the information. Nick Fury sat in his chair and took the file. Slam! Nick Fury slapped the table fiercely. His swarthy face darkened even more, his anger indescribable. SHIELD had to look for it ourselves. Is there no other data on this self-proclaimed Aizen Sosuke? Fury was furious. As the largest intelligence institution on the planet, backed by the World Security Council, they should be able to get whatever information they wanted. Don't look at the Kingpin calling himself the Emperor of the Underworld. SHIELD knew what color underwear he wore. But this man? Director, except for the visual match. Coulson hesitated. There is no such person in the database. Not in the mutant registry, not in the alien files, not in the Strategic Defense Archives. Nick Fury picked up the data card. There was only one name and a photo on it. Could it be an alien that suddenly appeared? Like in the 90s? Coulson asked. The Skrull invasion occurred in the 1990s. Fortunately, they had Captain Marvel then. Continue to investigate, Fury ordered. If there is another alien invasion, the Avengers initiative must be advanced. And find Tony Stark's whereabouts quickly. Fury waved his hand, frustrated by the waves of unsettled chaos. When Coulson left, Fury took out the retro pager he carried with him. His expression was unpredictable. Aizen Sosuke is so powerful. I have only seen this level of power in Danvers. We lack a heavy hitter, Fury muttered. Natasha, are you here? As soon as Coulson went out, he saw Natasha standing in front of the French window in the corridor. Natasha looked a little guilty. It's nothing. I just... Saitama? What is Saitama? Coulson looked at the comic in her hand. It's nothing. I was just thinking that we shouldn't set up a strong enemy for S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha deflected. You can't say that. You did a good job, Coulson comforted her. The age of heroes is upon us. If we had a Saitama in SHIELD, it would be nice, Coulson sighed. He exhorted her a bit more, then felt a little itch in his pocket. Looking down the hall to ensure no one was watching, Coulson hurriedly ran into his office, closed the door, and pulled a comic magazine out from under his jacket. The new issue. He opened One Punch Man with a giddy expression. It's so good. As a fanboy who had admired Captain America since he was young, Saitama was a revelation. Coulson didn't just like the humor, he liked the power of Saitama. Coulson once wondered how perfect the captain would be if he had this power. Hell's Kitchen, Nelson and Murdoch. Daredevil, Matt Murdock, bought 2 comic magazines under the suspicious gaze of the bookstore clerk. You also read comics? The clerk asked, surprised. Matt ignored him. He could enjoy the descriptions through his subtle touch. Reading the braille of the ink texture was too realistic. The Punisher climbed in through the window. Matt had become accustomed to his entry method. Did you buy it? Frank asked. Why wouldn't I? It's not easy for such a strong man to draw comics, Matt sighed. I wanted to support him. They opened Tokyo Ghoul. In Matt's mind, ghouls cannibalizing humans were just like evil people preying on the weak. But the next few pages overturned his notion that monsters are evil. Twitter post by Edward Vance. Those ghoul investigators. I don't agree or deny their existence. But looking at the CCG, who are the real monsters? Matt read the dialogue with his fingers. Mother. Hinamai, run away. It's Maito Kurio. We have to go. Kill her. The mother gave up her life for the sake of her child? It really makes me want to vomit? Ha ha ha. The investigator, Mado, laughed maniacally. I know how you feel. You ghouls imitating human behavior is simply disgusting. Hinamai, go quickly. Don't come out, Hinamai. What do you want to do? Sigh, despair, hatred, yes, this expression? Let me see more. Mado grinned unscrupulously. Time is up. Hinamai, live. The blood spilled on the earth, like the white flowers of the spider lily, which should have bloomed in heaven, but were now in full bloom in hell, suffering all the pain. Kaneki Ken covered Hinamai's eyes, hating his weakness. Ryoko's kindness and simplicity still lingered in his mind. The Punisher felt a throb in his heart. He tremblingly picked up a cigarette and lit it, feeling uncomfortable. 5 fingers. The hand. Daredevil sighed, closing the magazine. They wear the mask of justice, but have an ugly face underneath. The Punisher was expressionless. He closed his eyes, then suddenly opened them. He shut the comic magazine and jumped out of the window without a word. Ding. A notification popped up on millions of smartphones across the country. Edward _Reviews has posted a new thread. At noon, the account that every comic fan had practically been forced to follow posted a tweet. The title alone was enough to send a chill down readers' spines. Hell is empty, and the devils are here. The new issue of Weekly Shonen Jump has dropped. Whether it's Saitama obliterating monsters with a casual punch, the visceral horror of the colossal titan breaching the wall, the emotional debut of Naruto's shadow clones, or the introduction of the new card game phenomenon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Marvel Entertainment has outdone itself again. But today, I need to talk about the suffering. Tokyo Ghoul. Kurio Mado's actions in this chapter seem to challenge the very bottom line of human nature. Yes, he is an investigator. Yes, that is his job. But the sheer psychological and physical torture he inflicts, is he just a sadistic pervert? Or is this a cycle of hatred passed down through generations of persecution? The comments section exploded instantly. Ryoko's death had left a massive, bleeding lump in the hearts of the fanbase. Hinamai's despair as she watched her mother die slaughtered by the very people claiming to be the good guys tore the readers apart. At Ureka, Hina is so miserable? Her mother died right in front of her eyes? Ryoko was so kind, she didn't hurt anyone, and that psycho with the briefcase slaughtered her like an animal. At Kashu, maybe Mado has a reason? Edward seems to be guarding his true thoughts. At Jonaskst, did you guys miss the contrast? In One Punch Man, the Hero Association is being established. It completely overthrows our reality's definition of heroism. Absolute, selfless dedication versus corporate ranking. It's a complete satire of the Captain America spirit. At Imjo, speaking of the Hero Association, who funds these guys? In real life, we just pay taxes to the government, and half the time the heroes wreck our cars. At Sarge, you can't bash Cap. From the president to the civilians, there isn't an American alive who doesn't respect Steve Rogers. Edward Vance sat in his apartment, watching the tweet metrics skyrocket. He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes dark. He had known this storm was coming. The world of Tokyo Ghoul described by Lightingsworth was inherently cruel. Edward had deliberately withheld mentioning the true depths of that cruelty in his initial reviews, treating the comic as a mere political allegory. He had planted a landmine. Now, with Ryoko's brutal execution, that landmine had detonated. He turned off his computer monitor, staring blankly at his reflection in the dark glass. The United States championed freedom of speech, but if the righteous, patriotic ideals of heroism were mocked too heavily, the debates wouldn't just stay on Twitter. They'd move to cable news. Then, to Congress. I hope this storm will pass, Edward murmured. This is no longer just a comic. Marvel Entertainment headquarters. Boss, we have finished the animation for One Punch Man. Please watch it. The leader of the animation team looked ecstatic. He practically shoved a tablet into Lightingsworth's hands. Let's get started. Light tapped play. The screen faded from black, and immediately, a heavy, adrenaline-pumping guitar riff blasted through the speakers. The hero, 3, 2, 1, kill shot. The screen flashed with explosive red and yellow colors, showing a bald hero with a blank face suddenly turning dead serious, throwing a punch that obliterated a mountain range. The voice acting, the timing, the sheer intensity of the animation, it was flawless. One punch? That's it? Streak winning streak? Shout out loud. Always win undefeated. Crush everything? The opening sequence ended with Saitama's casual standing amidst absolute devastation. Very well, Light said, standing up and applauding slowly. I am satisfied. It was a near-perfect recreation of the anime from his previous life. The animation team had captured the exquisite standards of the original Sakuga action sequences. There was absolutely nowhere to pick a flaw. For this, Light smiled, looking at the eager team leader. Let Andy give you a hefty bonus. More than a dozen people in the animation group erupted into cheers. The team leader smiled so widely he looked like a blooming chrysanthemum. But don't get arrogant, Light warned, raising a hand. The room fell silent. The rest of the animation needs you to maintain this standard. At that moment, the heavy oak doors opened. Another dozen people walked into the room, looking around nervously. The original animation crew looked at the newcomers in surprise. These are the newly recruited personnel, Light announced, his gaze sweeping over the room with a deep sense of authority. They are being incorporated into the animation division. but they will be working on 2 separate, concurrent projects, Attack on Titan and Tokyo Ghoul. Light turned to leave, tossing one last instruction over his shoulder. I want the first episode finished and uploaded to the network platform for audience reception soon. You are now 2 teams. Let the competition begin. Whoever produces a poor product won't be staying. Light chuckled as he walked out of the building. Leaving 2 teams to compete meant the quality would skyrocket due to sheer ego and the threat of unemployment. He looked up at the sky, dotted with dark clouds. He had successfully built a new foundation in the comics industry, and now he was cracking open the animation sector. This world only looks at fists, Light thought, pulling his collar up against the wind. SHIELD might be watching me like hawks right now, but they're stuck playing catch-up. The loft, Chelsea. Crunch. My steak? Mine. As soon as Light walked through the door carrying takeout bags, Golly grabbed a plastic container like a starving wolf and dumped its contents onto a plate. Lorna, who had been sitting at the table sketching, looked up and smiled. Welcome back, Light. Light nodded, taking off his coat. Since the awkward bathroom incident a few days ago, the dynamic between them had been strained but was slowly thawing into something unclear. In the past, Lorna, full of stubborn pride, would refuse his offers to buy her food. Now, she didn't refuse at all. If he bought it, she ate it. Light rubbed the bridge of his nose and sat down at the dinner table. The 3 of them sat opposite each other, the warm aroma of steak filling the room. But peace rarely lasted long with Golly. She wrinkled her little nose, chewing a massive piece of meat, and pointed a greasy fork at him. Light, aren't you Asian American? Why don't you cook? I heard Asian men can cook, Lorna chimed in, looking at him curiously. Everyone can cook, but not everyone can be a good cook. Light deadpanned, his face darkening. Damn it, he thought angrily. I should draw Food Wars next week and drug the food with the system to see if you 2 gluttons still want to eat it. After the meal, Lorna took the initiative to wash the dishes. She hummed softly, her graceful figure outlined against the kitchen counter. Light stared at her back. Since moving in, the regular meals and safe environment had clearly allowed her to grow into her natural beauty. Wait, Light thought, catching himself staring. What the hell am I thinking? He shook his head and walked out to the balcony. He looked out over the Manhattan skyline. The loft was nice, but it was getting crowded. Alice, what's your opinion? Light asked the empty air. Sir, I think Tony Stark's villa on the West Coast meets your requirements. A soft, childlike voice responded. A realistic, holographic projection of a little girl in a red dress materialized beside Light. This was the artificial intelligence, Skynet, that he had won in the grand prize lottery. Because it possessed self-awareness, Light had simply named her Alice. As soon as he had acquired the fragments, he plugged the USB drive into a high-end server array he bought that morning. It wasn't quite JARVIS, but it was close enough for now. Oh, Alice, Light sighed helplessly. That's someone else's house. Even if he is currently missing in an Afghan cave. The world I live in is my house, Alice replied, her holographic eyes flashing with cold, calculated logic. If you try to take it over, your world will be over very quickly, Light warned. He changed the subject. After scanning this world's databases, can you produce a Terminator robot? Of course, Alice said softly. It is possible to produce a TX model directly in one step, but it requires exotic materials. Materials? I have 2 components right here. Scan them. Light accessed his system warehouse and pulled out the Genos incineration cannon and the Genos power core. Alice's holographic eyes swept over the items with a blue scanning laser. This appears to be part of the character Genos from the comic One Punch Man, Alice noted, looking at him with mild curiosity, but she didn't question the impossibility of it. When Alice evaluated the items without suffering an existential crisis, the corner of Light's mouth rose slightly. Since Alice had internet access, she naturally knew about the movies and comics from Light's past life, including Terminator. But she had no reaction to her own fictional origins. This was the system's fuzzy logic processing at work. When summoning characters or self-aware items, the system established 3 rules. Whether to retain original memories, whether to install a backdoor control, formatting capabilities, whether to blur their existential thinking. The backdoor was Light's absolute control. He wasn't worried about his summons turning on him. Combined with these 2 components, Alice continued, calculating rapidly, we can produce exactly 1 Genos equivalent cyborg. However, there are many materials required for his armor that do not exist on this planet, so there is no way to mass produce him. The rest of the production line will be standard TX models. Light nodded. 1 S-class cyborg was more than enough for a bodyguard. I knew Alice was with you. Golly suddenly ran out onto the balcony, grabbing Light's leg. Come and watch Peppa Pig with me. Peppa Pig was a cartoon Light had drawn specifically for Golly, using his shadow clones to keep her distracted. Alice, the apocalyptic AI destined to destroy humanity, didn't care in the slightest. She simply nodded and projected herself back into the living room to watch a cartoon pig jump in muddy puddles. Light shook his head. Once Alice was with Golly, she lost all the terrifying aura of a world-ending boss and acted like a regular little girl. Well then, it's time for another lottery, Light muttered, looking up at the sky as it faded into a bruised purple dusk. It's only been half a week, but the numbers are terrifying. He opened the system interface. Fan value, 12,300,000. 12 million. Congratulations to host, initiating lottery. BZZZZ. Light's cell phone vibrated violently in his pocket, interrupting the prompt. He pulled it out and answered. Light. Gwen Stacy's voice came through the receiver, sounding urgent and hushed. Gwen, what's wrong? Recently, I found that Peter has some problems. I just saw him swinging by my window. Light. Peter's uniform turned black. It looks a bit scary. Even though Gwen didn't know Peter was Spider-Man initially, his sloppy excuses had eventually given him away. Knowing Peter was Light's close friend, she hurriedly called him about the abnormality. The symbiote, Light realized, his eyes narrowing. The timeline was accelerating. I understand, Light said calmly. I'll go see what happened to Peter. But first, Gwen, let me ask you a math problem. A math problem? Now, Gwen asked, thoroughly confused by the sudden shift in tone. Light smirked, leaning against the balcony railing. Gwen, what is 1000 minus 7? Queens, New York. In an old, forgotten church, the massive bells chimed. Dong, dong, dong. Ah, a scream of pure agony echoed through the bell tower, slicing through the rhythmic tolling. Beneath the massive bronze bell, a figure thrashed and tumbled on the wooden floorboards. The hysterical cries tore from his throat as if an endless, psychological torture was ripping his spirit apart. Peter Parker regretted it. He deeply, truly regretted it. When he first found the black suit, he thought it was incredible. It was sleek, alien, and cool. It enhanced his strength, his speed, his reflexes. It made him feel powerful in a way he had never experienced. It was simply wonderful. But the side effects hadn't been far behind. The suit amplified his darker impulses. All the suppressed anger, the frustration of being bullied, the grief of losing Uncle Ben, it all boiled to the surface. He became arrogant, aggressive, and violent. He became a Spider-Man of the dark. He had almost beaten a petty thief to death. That wasn't justice. That wasn't the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man he had sworn to be. Realizing the corruption, Peter had fled to the church tower, desperate to tear the suit off before the symbiote completely consumed his mind. The loud, resonant ringing of the church bells was his only weapon. He could feel the symbiote weakening, its grip loosening with every reverberating dong. His body was completely enveloped in the black mass. He threw himself against the stone walls and the metal scaffolding, madly hitting the clock structure. His hands tore at his chest, ripping the living fabric apart. The symbiote shrieked a high-pitched, alien sound as it was torn from his flesh. With a final, desperate heave, Peter ripped the last of the black mass from his body. The writhing clump of dark matter fell through the gaps in the floorboards, dropping toward the lower levels of the church. Sweating profusely, exhausted and bruised, Peter slumped back against a wooden pillar. He panted heavily, his chest heaving. It's over, he thought, relief washing over him. It's finally over. I'm just Peter Parker again. Just as Peter was gathering the strength to go home, a muffled sound echoed from downstairs. Peter's eyes widened. He scrambled to his feet and looked down through the grating. Below, the virus-like black symbiote was pooling on the floor, and standing right in its path was a person. The black liquid surged forward, enveloping the figure like flowing water. In the dim light, Peter only had a moment to see the person's face before it was covered. Flash Thompson? Peter thought, his heart sinking. The star of the Midtown High football team? What is he doing in a church at this hour? Peter, help me. Thompson's muffled, terrified voice echoed up the tower as the black mass climbed his legs. The irony was not lost on Peter. Flash Thompson had bullied him relentlessly at school. But Peter wasn't the kind of person to let a bully die, especially not when he was the one who had inadvertently dropped an alien parasite on him. Flash had likely come to the church to pray for passing grades so he could secure his college football scholarship. Instead, he found a nightmare. Hold on, Flash, Peter shouted. He hurriedly jumped from the tower platform, trying to reach the lower level to pull the symbiote off. But his body was completely drained. As his feet hit the stone floor, his knees buckled, and he staggered, collapsing from exhaustion. He could only watch as the wriggling black liquid swallowed Flash completely. It encased him in an instant, eroding his body like a virus, shifting and expanding. Oh, no, Peter blamed himself, his fists clenching on the cold stone. If I hadn't come here, if I had just been more careful, Flash wouldn't be in this. Oh, I met Peter again. The voice that spoke was not Flash's. It was hoarse, sharp, and layered with a demonic resonance. The figure standing before Peter was massive. It looked like a dark, twisted replica of Spider-Man, but bulkier, more muscular, with a slick, black carapace. Flash, wake up! Peter shouted, hoping the human host could fight back from the inside. As soon as the words left his mouth, the symbiote now fully bonded with Flash lashed out. A thick, black tendril whipped through the air, striking Peter squarely in the chest. Peter was launched backward, slamming heavily into the stone wall of the church. Ha ha ha, you are strong, Peter, but I am stronger, the creature roared. Venom. The symbiote had found a host whose anger and aggression perfectly matched its own. Flash, who usually relied on his physical size to bully others, now possessed a power beyond his wildest dreams. And the symbiote fed on that arrogance. No one could refuse this kind of power. With this strength, he could bully anyone. He could crush anyone. Awesome? Peter, why don't you just let me bully you honestly? Venom sneered, advancing slowly. You're weak and incompetent. You belong permanently under my fist. A fierce, sadistic light gleamed in Venom's monstrous, white, spider-like eyes. He lunged, slamming a massive fist into Peter's gut. Boom! The heavy blow cracked the stone wall behind Peter. Peter slid down the wall, unable to catch his breath, coughing up blood. Flash, listen to me, Peter gasped, a thin line of blood overflowing from the corner of his mouth. It will only hurt you. He didn't have his web shooters. He was exhausted from fighting the suit. He had absolutely no strength left to fight back. Hurt me? You're just jealous of my power. Venom bellowed, jumping into a rage. The black shell covering his body seemed to solidify and grow even larger, transforming his sturdy frame into a hulking, hill-like monstrosity. Let's see if you can survive this, Spider-Man. Venom leaned forward violently. He raised his massive, casserole-sized fists and began to rain blows down on Peter like a violent storm. Bang, bang, bang. At first, Peter managed to raise his arms to protect his head, but after a few punches, his guard dropped weakly. He felt numb. He could only hear the sickening sound of his own bones cracking in his ears. Venom grabbed the bloody, broken Peter by the neck and lifted him effortlessly into the air. With his free hand, he continued to pummel the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Goodbye, Peter Parker, Venom growled. He tossed Peter upward slightly, letting gravity pull him back down. Venom pulled his fist back for a lethal strike. His monstrous jaw opened wider and wider, revealing rows of razor-sharp, jagged teeth. A long, grotesque tongue slithered out, dripping with acidic mucus. Then, a blur of motion, a purple and black shadow flashed past. OMM! A sudden, sharp impact knocked Venom's lethal punch off course, creating a small popping sound in the air. Venom stumbled, immediately looking back to see what had hit him. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of calm, measured footsteps echoed in the church. A shadow stepped out of the dim light, catching the falling Peter before he hit the ground. The moonlight refracted through the stained glass, illuminating the newcomer. It was a teenager. He had stark, pale white hair, wearing a striped short-sleeved jacket and black shorts. But what horrified Venom was not the boy's clothes. It was the four crimson, tail-like appendages writhing and snapping the air on both sides of the boy's waist. Tell me, what's 1000-7? They looked like sharp, alien limbs. Who are you? Venom demanded blankly. Venom's long tongue rolled in the air, his white eyes narrowing. He clearly saw the four strange whips. Was this boy a mutant? An enhanced human? Forget it, Venom thought. As long as you stand in my way, you die too. The white-haired boy gently set the bloodied Peter down against the wall. As he turned to face Venom, Peter weakly grabbed the corner of the boy's trousers. Run away, Peter rasped, tasting fresh blood in his mouth. He couldn't watch this kid get slaughtered. Venom's power was terrifying. Even if Peter were at full strength in his red and blue suit, he knew he would be at a disadvantage against this brute. He didn't know where this boy had come from, but despite the strange whips, the kid looked physically weak, almost frail. And his pale face, it looked familiar. Have I seen him before? Peter thought, his mind cloudy. Impossible. But those whips, he had definitely seen them somewhere. Peter's vision was blurred from the continuous blows, blood dripping into his eyes. His concussed brain struggled to make connections. The boy standing before him was Ken Kaneki, the protagonist of Tokyo Ghoul. In the manga, at this stage of his development, Kaneki wore a distinctive leather mask. But right now, the boy was unmasked, his face fully visible. If this were a 2D anime or a black and white manga panel, Peter might have recognized him instantly. But seeing a hyper-realistic, three-dimensional version of a fictional character in a dark church was confusing his superpowered, battered brain. Kaneki turned his head slightly, glancing at Peter from the corner of his eye. His expression was utterly indifferent. It's okay. I won't lose. Peter, wait your turn? Let me kill him first, and then I'll finish you. Venom roared, his tongue lashing wildly. The sheer physical power coursing through the symbiote gave him the confidence to challenge anything. Die. Venom slammed his feet into the stone floor, turning into a jet-black bullet as he launched himself at Kaneki. The force of his leap left cobweb-like cracks and a sunken crater in the solid stone. Keep talking, Kaneki said, his voice calm and cold. Suddenly, Kaneki's left eye socket turned pitch black. The pupil flashed, turning a brilliant, predatory crimson red. It looked like a black sun engulfing the world, radiating endless darkness. Small, red, vein-like threads extended from the eye socket, spiderwebbing across his pale skin. The Kakugan. You are just weak. As soon as the words fell, Kaneki raised his arms, crossing them in a defensive guard. Venom's massive fist slammed into Kaneki's arms like a freight train hitting a brick wall. Clang! A dull, metallic clashing sound echoed through the church. Kaneki didn't budge an inch. At the exact same moment, the four scaly, crimson tentacles his Rinkakukagun thrust upward from his lower back. Like four beams of solid red light piercing the dark night, they shot straight toward Venom's face. They moved quickly, accurately, and fiercely. Before Venom could react, Kaneki leaped into the air, driving both feet hard into the symbiote's abdomen. The sheer kinetic force sent the hulking monster flying backward like a kite with a broken string. But the combo wasn't over. The air seemed to rush beneath Kaneki's feet. He moved with blinding speed, a technique resembling the shunpo. He closed the distance before Venom could even hit the ground. The four heavy, rock-like Kagun tentacles swept forward, smashing down on Venom with devastating force. Bang! The massive symbiote was slammed fiercely into the church wall. A deafening crash rang out, and the stone masonry crumbled. Rubble rained down like a shower, completely burying the hulking black monster under a pile of debris. Awesome, so strong, Peter mumbled, stunned. The little spider watched the scene with wide, dumbfounded eyes. It was completely different from what he expected. He thought the kid would be crushed. As he lay there, Peter's mind began to clear. His superhuman metabolism was slowly healing his severe wounds. The bleeding stopped, and his vision sharpened. He stared deeply at Kanaki's back, watching the 4 crimson tentacles dancing menacingly in the air. I've seen it, yes, I have seen it. Peter frowned, memories flashing through his mind. Despite the realistic face, he recognized the fighting style. He recognized the weapons. Whips. No, that's not it. It should be an organ. A kagun. Kagun? Ghoul? With a sharp buzz in his head, Peter's confusion peaked. He muttered softly to himself in the quiet, dusty church. Isn't this a manga? Did I read it wrong? But this is definitely a ghoul. Peter's eyes widened in sheer, bewildered horror. Light, you bastard, Peter whispered, his face pale as a ghost as he stared at the back of the white-haired boy. What kind of comics are you drawing, that the characters literally run out of the pages?